the area, producing some very strong winds. Within the past hour, we've had a gust up to 68 miles an hour. And again, as you can see from the radar, a lot of rain from this, and the rain and the wind are going to be some big problems as
strong winds gusting around. Now, because the storm is going west, but at a slow speed of only about 6 miles per hour, you do have a difference of which storms are stronger, the ones up on the top or the ones wrapping around the bottom, but it's a very subtle difference. So those of you who are watching us in the, say, central Miami,
southern Miami-Dade, going back into the Atlantic and wrapping around north again into Broward County. This right here, this line is actually the eastern end, or the eastern side of the eye wall. We've got very heavy rainfall here, very strong winds. Here's where you'll find those hurricane-force winds as they start to make their way in right now over Deerfield Beach. This will start closing in. First Fort Lauderdale, then Hollywood, and then finally make its way towards western parts of
Palm right now. In fact, if you're in that area, there's really not a whole lot going on right now. Things have really settled down. It's still overcast, but the winds have gotten light. But on the edge of the eye wall, that's where the worst weather is. So where Hank was around Deerfield Beach, look at that very heavy, squally rain band moving in from Pompano to Deerfield Beach. That's what's going on there right now. But just a few blocks over the past several hours. And fortunately for us, it didn't have a whole lot more time to strengthen. If it had sat out there for another 3 or 4 hours, it might have gone to a Category 2. That's how quickly the pressure was dropping. But it is now onshore, just about completely onshore now. In about another hour or so, the eye will be completely over land, and then we will start to lose.
This morning, it started taking a little further jog towards the south, and right now it's in the county line between Miami-Dade and Broward counties. Here's another really...
Está siendo declarado como que llegó a tierra, eso ya lo habíamos adelantado aquí en Telemundo 51 de que había estado llegando a tierra, y al llegar a tierra se declaró que tenía vientos de 80 millas por hora. Así que hasta que a las 8 o 9 actualicen la información, el viento oficialmente subió a 80 millas por hora, pero eso lo hizo justo antes de tocar tierra. Nosotros le hemos mostrado a ustedes, y lo vamos a recalcar ya mismo, pero quiero revisar esto primero, como que el hecho de que desde que tocó tierra, ahora empieza a debilitarse, lo cual es una excelente noticia. Pero tocó tierra con vientos de 80, tocó tierra oficialmente declarado por el Centro Nacional de Huracanes entre North Miami Beach y Hallandale Beach. Ese es el lugar oficial donde Katrina tocó tierra durante el atardecer de hoy, como aproximadamente a las 6:30 de la tarde. Vimos la entrada. Es en vivo y podemos ver exactamente cómo se está comportando. Ya se está rellenando el ojo del huracán con precipitaciones. Al rellenarse está menos definido. Eso quiere decir que ya ha empezado a perder fuerzas, y seguramente esos vientos sostenidos de 80 millas por hora no están presentes, pero sí hay ráfagas muy fuertes. Y se midió una ráfaga, y esta sí va a ser la más alta hasta el momento, más allá de lo que he dicho en cualquier momento esta tarde.
From this perspective, if I was looking at this out to sea, I'd say, yeah, it looks like it could be a minimal hurricane, but it wouldn't be much more than that. And that's it holds true for this picture as well. There's a lot of convection over us, and then another big area of strong.
Definitivamente son preocupantes. Han ocurrido también en Miami-Dade. Vamos a Radar Doppler 51 porque hay más novedades, entre ellas el potencial de un tornado actualmente ocurriendo en algunos sectores de la zona de Kendall, tal vez justo cerca de South Miami. Vamos a hacer un acercamiento porque ya, como les he comentado, si es color naranja no necesariamente es tornado, pero cuando ya es color rojo, entonces existe el potencial de que estemos viendo un tornado justo en esa pared que rodea al ojo del huracán. O sea, el ojo del huracán probablemente es esto que están viendo aquí. Esto probablemente es el ojo del huracán, y este es el anillo que rodea al ojo del huracán, donde las intensas precipitaciones y fuertes vientos están afectando. Así que justo en esa región, en ese borde, se ha formado posiblemente un tornado. Vamos a ver exactamente dónde es esto, mirando la...
It's not good. Special statement out of the National Hurricane Center just in a few moments ago. They have bumped the winds and the strength of Katrina up by 30 miles an hour. Top winds now 145 miles an hour. This is now a Category 4 storm on the Saffir-Simpson scale. These were the details here in terms of the location and such are from the 10 p.m. Central Advisory. We're expecting the full up 1 a.m. advisory any time now, and as soon as we have it, we'll update this stuff. But as we look at it, you can see that this storm has gotten itself better organized. Notice that eye poking out, a very circular storm. In fact, let's go to a different view here, and this thing has just continued to get itself better organized. Outflow is consistent in all quadrants. There's very little shear over this storm. Every indication here says this is a storm that has its eyes on getting stronger, and certainly with the new advisory out, that indication is coming to pass. Last pass through, the Hurricane Hunter aircraft seeing central pressure at 935 millibars. This pressure has been dropping all evening. Nothing here really to indicate that there's anything that's going to keep this storm from make this storm weaken. No shear in the system to rip it apart. Very warm sea surface temps, and notice it's tracking off to the northwest right now. So as soon as we have that 1 a.m. advisory, we'll get that in for you. Let's check the latest.
75 miles per hour knocked out power to 1.4 million people. Even now, several 100,000 remain without power in South Florida. But
Maximum sustained winds are near 160 miles an hour, which makes this a powerful Category 5 hurricane. But look at this, wind gusts have been to 196 miles an hour, and that movement west-northwest at 12.
Out here, you can see some of the wind reports already almost gale force well away from here. These are sustained winds, not gusts reporting here. So the gusts are higher than this. The core of strong winds is in here. That's where the real horrible, disastrous wind structure is, and that's where we're going to be monitoring where that goes.
Huge storm. It really takes up the entire Gulf, and you can see the cooler cloud tops in the central portions really wrapping around very strongly around that eye that spans about 30 miles. And then you have a tail that dips all the way down to the Yucatan Peninsula and is dragging itself through Cuba, affecting the western portions of Florida, and now affecting even the Panhandle, Mississippi, Alabama, and also you have it affecting the coast of Louisiana. As we take a look at the radar satellite, I want you to kind of zoom in on where I'm putting this spotlight, because that's where we are already seeing showers and storms moving onshore. This system is getting closer and closer, and we're just at Sunday morning, and we do expect this to make landfall as we move into the evening hours of Sunday and the early Monday morning hours. This, of course, just like us with Katrina, coming through at nighttime when, you know, it's dark out there. Of course, the feeder bands will move through before we see the eye move through, and whenever we talk about it moving on shore, we show you when the eye moves on shore. But we already are seeing this move dangerously close to the coastline. I know there's two big highways to get out of New Orleans and get out of the way and head either west or head west would be the best way to go anyways, because this storm is moving towards the northeast, but many people already jammed trying to leave the city.
Areas in between, be ready for this hurricane to come ashore, dump tremendous amounts of rain, and each hurricane that comes ashore has the possibility of creating tornadoes. Meanwhile, here's what the latest warnings map looks like now. Once again, hurricane warnings from the Alabama, Mississippi, actually Alabama-Florida state line through Mississippi, down across the shoreline of Louisiana to Morgan City. This does include the city of New Orleans, and this does mean that storm surge, the saltwater push of this storm as it moves ashore, could be anywhere from 10 to 15 feet. In fact, parts of southeast Louisiana may see a storm surge upwards of 25 feet above sea level.
After the storm knocked out power and flooded homes, many people have been wading through waterlogged streets without traffic lights, searching for open grocery stores or emergency aid. Power crews expect to have 90% of its customers in Miami-Dade and Broward counties restored.
The same folks that brought you those numbers of the 175-mile-an-hour winds, those hurricane hunters from the Air Force, are now giving us some more disturbing news on the size and the extent of Katrina right now. They're talking about the hurricane force winds that extend out from the eye of this, now extending out 105 miles, and the tropical force winds. And keep in mind, these are also very dangerous winds, 40 miles an hour all the way up to 74 miles an hour. They extend 205 miles out from the center of Katrina. This is a very strong storm and a very big storm. What's going to happen in the next hour or so? Right now it's only about 200 miles southeast of the Mississippi, mouth of the Mississippi. So if these winds are extending out, the tropical storm force winds 205 miles, it's very likely that very soon that the areas of the northern Gulf Coast are going to start to feel.
We don't know which county yet or which parish is going to have the worst everybody in that area needs to prepare as if they're going to get the worst, though.
Indeed. Called in from the Midwest and from as far away as New York because of the likelihood that their particular skills will be needed when the hurricane strikes. We're approaching a key point in this day when at noon a national telecom.
But we do think that in response to a trough off to the north and west, it's going to lead it toward a turn more toward the north as we go through the rest of the day today.
And that's right, and that's where things become a little more questionable, because here we have our cone that continues to align itself right along the north central Gulf Coast, and what we're looking at right now is a landfall anywhere possibly from, let's say, Mobile Bay to the New Orleans area, and the key will be exactly when does it begin to make that northwesterly turn there, because when that happens, that should pretty much put it on a beeline for where it will impact land on Monday. Now, of course, the Weather Channel is keeping you ahead of the storm.
And of course, we have crews all along the Gulf Coast this morning. Hurricane expert Dr. Steve Lyons has been tracking this powerful hurricane at the expert desk. Meteorologist Stephanie Abram, picture here. It's not often that you see a hurricane that looks like this. Again, there have only been 3 Category 5s to hit the U.S. The Labor Day storm in 1935 that hit the Keys, Camille in 69, and Andrew in 92. And here's just another perspective on this system to sort of compare it to some of these storms in the past. And again, 907 millibars. Well, we say that Camille, lowest pressure 905. Gilbert, amazing 888.
I don't think we can stress enough the danger that a Category 5 hurricane brings with it.
Coming up, we'll show you why New Orleans is very vulnerable.
The expert, that's an F3 tornado strength. And he says that's able to knock down most walls and houses, blow off the roofs of homes, and so on and so forth. Only steel reinforced concrete buildings will stand up against 175-mile-per-hour winds. Now, do we expect it to stay that strong at landfall? No, but do we expect it to be a Cat 5? Yes. And wind tomorrow. The battle right now of where it's going is between this trough and that little short wave you see coming down right there, and the circulation. And notice how it's elongated in this egg shape. It's becoming more elongated with time. That's going to turn it to the north. But it's going still on a west-northwest track. That's bad news for New Orleans. It's better news for the Florida Panhandle. It's already passed by most of the Florida Panhandle. It would actually have to turn back to the northeast to hit you directly. But keep in mind, there's already water level rises here and very high wave action is going to occur there. You're going to get some beach erosion as well. But the devastation we're concerned about, now here's the circulation here moving to the north, well defined. We don't see anything that's going to weaken it significantly. It may weaken a little bit before it gets to the coast, but it's not going to weaken that much.
We'll continue to track that, though, through the afternoon. We think maybe sometime later today we'll see more of a prominent turn.
That's right. And as we were...
That's right, and we still are projecting track that will take the center to the southeastern coast of Louisiana, perhaps a little bit east of that to the coast of Mississippi, but basically an area from the western Florida Panhandle down to the southeast part of Louisiana is going to expect very severe weather. This is a large hurricane in addition to being extremely intense, and unfortunately not only New Orleans but the communities either side of New Orleans are going to experience hurricane conditions.
Well, a lot of folks are watching this hurricane, not just people in that area, because obviously the impact is going to be felt pretty much nationally. Many are hoping that it's going to weaken somewhat. Is that a well-founded hope, or is this gaining strength? What's its status right now?
We can certainly hope that that will occur, and sometimes hurricanes as they approach the northern Gulf Coast do weaken. We have to realize even if it were to weaken by 50 knots of wind, it would still be a major hurricane. So we're talking about a hurricane now that we're forecasting to come ashore at Category 5, conceivably still Category 4, conceivably still Category 5, and that's going to cause extensive to potentially catastrophic damage, both because of the winds and because of the storm surge that's going to be driven inland near and just to the east of where the center crosses the coast, maybe 20 feet or more of storm surge.
When last we spoke, you mentioned Camille, which hit the Gulf Coast around Mississippi almost 40 years ago. And I'm looking at my chart here that says Category 5, catastrophic, most buildings destroyed. If it does hit New Orleans, if it does stay near Category 5, and you pointed out that it's not going to make much difference if it's just slightly weaker, but what is New Orleans going to look like?
I hesitate to even consider what that's going to be, but if it does make a direct impact on New Orleans, then yes, we're going to see extensive to catastrophic damage, even to well-fortified structures, and that's from the wind. Of course, New Orleans has the second, just as important problem with its level being below sea level and with storm surge potentially coming in from the lake, particularly to the north. This is going to be a long-term recovery for the area that gets hit, whether it's New Orleans or otherwise. It's going to be a long time, days to weeks or longer, for power, and it'll take a long time, even longer, for the infrastructure to be back in place as we know it now.
Well, you never want to see a storm like this hit anywhere, but it does seem that there's one place where it's
Path here, you can see where it's been going. It's been wobbling back and forth, typical of very strong hurricanes, generally on a line toward the southeast Louisiana coastline. But we expect it to take a turn more toward the north in the next few hours. Now, if it doesn't take a turn toward the north, it looks like it's going to go just on the west side of New Orleans, which is the most devastating side if that does happen. Now let's look at what some of the...
There you see it, with 175-mile-an-hour winds and closing in on Louisiana's southeastern coast. Its eye is about 225 miles south-southeast of the mouth of the Mississippi, moving north-northwest at nearly 12 miles an hour. Hurricane warnings are in effect from Morgan City, Louisiana, to the Alabama-Florida border. Katrina is expected to make landfall between Grand Isle and the mouth of the Mississippi. Right now, where does the storm stand?
Oh, Jackie, there's
This
not
is
a lot
Randy,
of good
actually,
news
who's
here.
speaking to
I'm
you.
sorry. Okay, I can't see you, but I hear you. Okay, no good news here. This is still a powerful Category 5 hurricane, and I would expect catastrophic damage as it makes landfall. You know, we need to just pray that the loss of life is kept low here. People really need to rush all their preparations to protect life and property to completion.
All right, Max, I'm going to bring in now Jackie Jarris. I know she has a couple of questions for you as well. Jackie?
Yeah, Max, I know intensity is the most difficult thing to forecast. What are the chances that this could weaken at all, do you think, before making land?
There's certainly a chance that it could weaken a little bit, you know, before it gets to the coast. But unfortunately, this is so large and so powerful that it's a little bit like the difference of being run over by an 18-wheeler or a freight train. Neither prospect is good.
How big is this storm? This is huge. This is encompassing like half of the Gulf of Mexico.
And that's what makes this hurricane different from the other Category 5 hurricanes. The Labor Day hurricane in the Florida Keys in 1935, Camille in the Mississippi coast in 69, and of course Andrew in 92 were all Cat 5 hurricanes at landfall, but they were much, much smaller.
Right.
The hurricane force winds go out about 100 miles, the tropical storm force winds about 200 miles. This is going to have a tremendous impact on a very large area of the Gulf of Mexico, and then the strong winds and heavy rains and tornadoes will be spreading well inland.
How wide of a swath of damage are we talking? Can you say?
Sure, I think that those hurricane force winds, again, are out away 100 miles from the center, so
200 plus miles across.
Right, we're talking about a very large area here coming up through Louisiana, Mississippi, western Alabama. The winds, the hurricane force winds, will likely extend inland 175 miles or so. And we need to remember, you don't have to have hurricane force winds to down trees and power lines.
Right. Looking at the satellite picture behind you there, Max, are we starting to see a little pull northward?
Well, Jackie, we see wobbles all the time. Whether this is, you know, the true northward motion, only time will tell. But, you know, our best guess is that it's still going to move, you know, west of due north, and, you know, really have the biggest impact over southeast Louisiana, Mississippi. But I want to make sure people understand that there'll be some impact all along that northeastern Gulf Coast.
And what happens after it moves inland?
Well, the winds will likely come down. Usually they decrease by about 50% in 12 hours or so. That means that it will spread well inland. The rains will also spread well inland. We're talking about this system going through Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, up in Ohio, the eastern Great Lakes here by Tuesday or Wednesday.
So is Katrina pretty much going to be affecting parts of the U.S. all week long?
A large part of the U.S., you know, through Wednesday at least.
Okay, thanks very much.
Hurricane Katrina now, Category 5 hurricane. It's been fluctuating a little bit as far as sustained wind speeds. Perfectly normal for a storm this size, or any storm basically going through this development. You can see very, very strong eye wall right there. That's the area of most intense hurricane winds, and we are talking some monster winds. 167 miles an hour sustained at the surface, with gusts over 200 miles an hour. A very low central pressure at 902 millibars. It's moving to the northwest at 13. So you want to think of it a couple of different ways. It's 226 miles south-southeast of the city of New Orleans, but it also is just about 150 miles off the mouth of the Mississippi. So this continues to get closer and closer. As far as the size of this thing, it's 120,000 square miles. That's larger than the entire Bahama island chain. Remember, the Bahamas are about 700 islands. They stretch out about 100,000 square miles. This is 120,000 square miles. So real quickly, and we'll wrap up here, Cheryl, there's the projected path. Landfall sometime in the mid-morning tomorrow morning as a very strong Category 4, if not a Category 5 hurricane with devastating impacts on New Orleans all the way in through Mississippi and Alabama. So that's a quick look at what Hurricane Katrina is going to be.
And look at this, we do have now a tornado watch up for much of the Gulf Coast, parts of Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. New Orleans, more waves of rain. These are the outer bands of rain from Hurricane Katrina already strafing the Gulf Coast. We're seeing more rain come through New Orleans. Biloxi, we've got some more storms heading your way just to the northwest of us. And again, we have a tornado watch. This means we can see quickly forming tornadoes with little advance warning. That's kind of the signature with these tornadoes spawned with hurricanes, is we get very little advance warning time. So again, hopefully you are out of this area, because this will just continue.
Another look, take a look, Paul, at the well-defined eye. The eye now 32 miles wide. We're talking about a Category 5 hurricane. We've only had 3 Category 5 hurricanes hit the U.S. Andrew in 92, Camille in 69, the Labor Day storm of 35. So we're talking about, Paul, an unprecedented event that in our lifetimes we have never really seen.
Great news is pressure's gone up a little bit, winds weaken a little bit, but still expect. It was up to 175 earlier this afternoon. Northwest, we are still waiting for that northwest turn.
Seeing the effects of this trough, and we're hoping that that's going to weaken it just a little bit, or a lot, but at least a little bit before it gets all the way to the coast. But that's going to make it turn toward the north. The Louisiana coastline, extreme eastern portions, and the Mississippi coastline are by far the most vulnerable to it right now, and that's reflected in our cone here. There's where it's going to make landfall first. It may make a double landfall as it comes in and makes a landfall in Mississippi after Louisiana, or it may just stay in Louisiana a while and then eventually go in there if it goes very close to New Orleans. Hurricane Charlie was last year as a Category 4, and this is a Category 5. So a much bigger impact over a much larger area. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to get to.
How much water can you get into the city in that amount of time? No one knows the answer to that question, not even an expert hydrologist, and so we'll have to see.
At its current speed, how long would you think it would take?
And we are watching and listening right now to coverage from our affiliate WDSU-TV. They were interviewing the mayor of New Orleans there, Ray Nagin, and some interesting things he had to say, calling this situation that he's facing there tonight, that his city is facing, quote, a nightmare, a once-in-a-lifetime event.
6 degrees off the world record for temperatures in terms of large bodies of water. The Gulf of Mexico rarely gets above, say, a 92 or a 91, so it's almost as warm as it can get. And so the water temperature is certainly not in our favor right now.
Mayor Nagin, what are you going to be doing?
Storm surge. Have we seen any water rise yet?
We sure have. It's already rising about 4 feet above the normal astronomical tides here in Mississippi near Biloxi and Waveland, both of those locations. So the water's starting to pile up in here with the southeasterly flow driving in toward the Mississippi and Louisiana coastline. And that's going to increase as this band of strong winds is starting to near the outer portions of southeastern Louisiana. As a matter of fact, winds are gusting to 63 miles per hour now out here. So the wind is starting to come onshore. It's going to get bad very quickly here. And when this core comes onshore, the winds are really going to push that water inland, and that's...
Well, Geraldo, this right now is as strong as Hurricane Andrew was when it made landfall in 1992. It's about the same intensity as Camille in 69. But there's a big difference. This hurricane is much larger than either Camille or Andrew, so this is going to have a much larger impact over a large, very, very large area.
They called Camille the mother of all hurricanes in terms of hitting that Gulf Coast in 1969, I think it was, causing so many deaths, so much damage and destruction. Are you saying, Max, and we try...
In New Orleans, that's the greatest concern we've always had in the whole Gulf of Mexico. And they're already getting these rain bands. There's some tropical storm force bands within these outer rain bands, but the core of the hurricane down here is yet to come. The center will likely be on the coast tomorrow morning. But the core with the stronger winds will be arriving, you know, sometime later tonight, at least on near the mouth of Mississippi, and then progressing inland. So this is going to be a very long night for the folks there in the coastal areas of Louisiana, and a very, very long day. I would expect some loss of life during the day tomorrow.
Well, it's starting to turn a little more north, Mike, but it hasn't gone straight north yet. And if it goes west of New Orleans offshore, it's probably going to go back over the city. What's the scenario here? Here comes that shortwave finally. That's definitely going to turn it off to the northeast, but it may be too late because the system is already just south of the southeastern tip of Louisiana. New Orleans is just a little farther over, so it's going to be ever so close. And the circulation is fairly large, so you're going to see some significant impacts in New Orleans. But it's still, believe it or not, too early to tell whether or not they're going to be on the right or the left side of the circulation. If they're on the right side of the circulation at landfall, they're going to have a huge surge in there, and it could be a big catastrophe. All right, here's the radar here now, and I'm going to put this into motion. You can see a lot of the rain bands that are coming on shore. Some of the rain bands have had tornado warnings on them, and some of the strongest first winds are going to be coming near Venice, Louisiana, very shortly. Now, here's the core of strong winds in the eye wall here. These distances here are about 60 nautical miles. From that edge of the eye wall to that edge of the eye wall is about 40 to 45 miles. That's a swath of very strong destruction there as it comes on shore. Category 4, Category 5 winds as it comes on shore. That's a large area. And so we've been talking about the surge on the coast, but what about the wind impacts? Well, they're going to extend with the destructive wind that's able to really affect structures. Greatest threat in the red, but significant threat well up to the
30 miles south of the mouth of the Mississippi River. It's moving north-northwest at around 11 miles per hour. Next advisory comes out at 11 p.m. Eastern. That one's going to be a really important one because we're going to get a new track. We've been watching these tracks every couple of hours, and the National Hurricane Center has been pretty bang on with that direction over the last, I would say, 12 to 24 hours. And at this point in time, it does look like the center of the storm going right over our friends in New Orleans. Just want to take a look at radar as well. A live look at some of the outer bands that are already moving across the Gulf Coast region, southeastern Louisiana coast. We're getting sustained winds of 58 miles per hour and gusts of 63 miles per hour. So obviously seeing some of those heavier bands moving in. Tropical storm force winds, already feeling those. We'll start to feel those hurricane strength winds, and then of course those heavy rains. New Orleans, you're going to feel hurricane force winds for probably almost 12 hours. As well, we're going to see tornadoes. We have a tornado watch in effect southeastern Louisiana into southeastern Mississippi, southwestern Alabama, and the western tip of the Panhandle. So not only that horrific storm surge, the heavy rains, 10 to 15 inches of rain on top of 30 feet of storm surge perhaps. We have the fact that we're going to see tornadoes well into the evening, into the morning hours, and of course well into next week throughout a lot of the states, moving as the storm moves inland. Mississippi, Tennessee, Ohio Valley, you could see 5-10 inches of rainfall on already saturated ground. So this is our latest track, still a Category 5.
An amazing system, one of the top 5 strongest hurricanes in recorded history, bearing down on the Gulf Coast right now. A well-developed 15 to 20 mile wide eye, a tightly compact system, and it looks like it is about to make landfall sometime in the next 12 hours along the Louisiana coast. Top winds right now 160 miles an hour. It is moving north-northwest at 11. The pressure still at 904 millibars. It's currently centered 130 miles south of New
Orleans. Right toward the New Orleans area. As we'll see in a second, though, even if it did shift a little bit here or there to the west or east, it really doesn't make a difference at this point. You can see how well defined the eye is. And again, its motion to the north-northwest. The eye extremely well defined in terms of looking for structure in a hurricane. This one is pretty much on the ball, perfect as far as what you would expect from a really intense storm. And yes, the outer bands drenching the northern Gulf Coast, and the eye now coming into view in the radar as well. It's getting that close to New Orleans. The latest stats, this was as of 8 p.m., winds of 160 miles an hour. Earlier today, they were up to 175. The pressure, 904 millibars earlier today, down to 902, which put it as the 4th lowest pressure for a storm in the Atlantic Basin. And yes, that does beat Andrew as well. 130 miles south of New Orleans. So this storm is one of the most intense that we have ever seen here in the Atlantic Basin. It's a Category 5, and it could land as a strong Category 4 or in the low end of a Cat 5, but either way, it really will not make much of a difference. You're going to get catastrophic damage in this instance either way you look at it. And you can see right here in that wind field as I stop it here, the red here indicating the hurricane force winds, and they extend out covering about half of Louisiana, all the way east of Mississippi, and all the way to even almost parts of Alabama as well. So the wind field covering pretty much that whole chunk of the northern Gulf states. As we look on ahead to what could happen in our neck of the woods over the next week or so, we have a new tropical depression out there in the Atlantic east of the Lesser Antilles. This is Tropical Depression 13. It looks right now a little ragged. We're keeping an eye on it. It could get more organized over the next few days, and we could see
all the moisture from Hurricane Katrina going to keep it very steamy and sticky here for most of the week. That's Katrina bearing down on the Gulf Coast. Then there's a bit of a break. The high-level winds from that basically ripping everything apart east of there. However, far enough out there over the ocean away from the influence of Katrina is brand new tropical depression number 13. It is right now a weak system, top winds 30 miles an hour. You can see the Lesser Antilles out there. It's about 965 miles east of there. Our forecast track takes it out over the open waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Should not pose a threat to the northernmost leewards as it
right now. We're coming into some of the outer bands here actually, and just getting some of the heavier rain from time to time. We had a pretty good band move through when we first got here about 7 or 8 o'clock, and a lot of lightning and some gusty winds and heavy rain. That's been stated. We also want to be on the record here at AccuWeather.com to say
storm to shore. I was on Fort Lauderdale Beach, and we were without power until at least Saturday. These folks are looking at standing water for quite some time and the possibility of a loss of power for an extended period of time. So this is
could weaken down to a Category 4, but it's still going to be a very strong Category 4, and that is going to produce significant damage. But look at this radar. It's spinning around here, and you say, wow, why is that little buzzsaw spinning faster than that? Because that is the eye wall right there. That eye wall is going to get to Venice, Louisiana in approximately 7 hours. It'll get just to the east of New Orleans in about 11 hours and near the Mississippi coastline in about 13 or 14 hours if it stays on the same course and moves straight north. If it moves straight north, notice the western eye wall here will pass to the east of 90 West, and New Orleans is at or just to the west of 90 West, so it's going to be just on the outside. So if it doesn't go any farther west, you're going to miss the strongest winds in this New Orleans, but you're still going to get very strong winds, and that's assuming it's going straight north or slightly to the northeast. Right now it's 160 miles per hour. Still a Category 5 hurricane, but there is a possibility it could weaken below that before making landfall. So don't let your guard down here. It could be very blustery winds in here in New Orleans, even though the eye wall may not miss you. And I say may not because we can't call it that close yet. It's still about 11 hours away. Now here's the overall track that it's taken. You can see with time it's gotten more and more northerly track. Now it's moving north-northwest at about 10 miles per hour, and we're expecting it to make landfall moving about due north. So if it doesn't get past 90, we might be in better shape for New Orleans, although Biloxi, Mississippi, you're still in bad shape because the eye wall looks like it's going to hit you. One portion of the eye wall or another may hit you no matter what. In the meantime, blustery winds over here in the western Florida Panhandle and high surf there as well.
Still down under the breaking news. We will zoom in here for you. We have not got landfall yet officially from the Hurricane Center. They don't expect to do that for another 30 minutes. The center is still offshore. Bastion Bay, though, that's my guess to where at least the first landfall will be. There will obviously be another one on up toward the north. The winds in this advisory have died down a little bit to 145. That is still a Category 4 hurricane. Mobile, right around the city, the town of Hurricane. That's where the tornado warning is right now. And for Biloxi, you asked about this. This is just one of those outer bands. Biloxi, you're still almost 100 miles from the center of this storm.
Isle, Louisiana, just moments ago, Katrina arrived as a Category 4 hurricane. Reported winds before landfall were 150 miles an hour. The storm had weakened from a Category 5 hurricane earlier this morning, but
Let's remind our viewers, Hurricane 5 means catastrophic damage. Hurricane 4 means extreme damage.
Monitor it. Working on shore right now. It does have some top sustained winds still of 145 miles per hour. Now that has weakened somewhat overnight, but again, this is still a Category 4 hurricane. Very dangerous situation through here. It is moving right now to the north at about 15 miles per hour.
And its barometric pressure is at 918 right now. Again, as Heather said, 145 mile per hour max winds, moving north 15, 70 miles south-southeast of New Orleans. That's all. And of course, we have meteorologists stationed throughout that.
Do you think that New Orleans will see the worst of this?
Well, right now it looks like about 2 or 3 hours, the northwestern eye wall of the circulation will make its closest approach to southeastern New Orleans. Right now it's making landfall near Port Sulphur, Louisiana, and the extreme southeastern portions there. You see the eye, and moving straight north. So we expect it to miss New Orleans to the east just slightly, but the western eye wall could catch southeastern portions of the city of New Orleans. Either way, they're going to have very strong winds, well over hurricane force. Power outages will be widespread. Down in here, signs down. Significant damage to structures is probably occurring. It'll come up to the north and make a second landfall in Mississippi in somewhere around 4 hours or so, maybe a little beyond that, but approximately 4 hours there near Biloxi Gulfport, or just to the west of there. Now let's look at the radar, because that's going to tell us a couple of interesting things. First of all, you see the center there. There's the eye wall in there where the strongest winds are right there. That band is moving to the north. There's the city of New Orleans there, so it's going to pass to the east of New Orleans. But to Slidell as well. It's going to pass east of there. But here's Gulfport, Biloxi, and this right front quadrant is going to be sliding up there. Right now we've already seen a surge there measured by NOAA buoy gauges of about 8 or 9 feet. And the circulation hasn't even gotten there, so we expect the water to rise there rather dramatically. Circulation is too close to New Orleans, and the left eye wall is very close to the southeastern portions. About an hour ago, when we lost contact with the radio station we were doing an interview with, a reporting site just to the southeast of downtown New Orleans in St. Charles Parish reported a wind gust to 105 miles per hour. And that was not in the eye wall. That was outside the eye wall. Now the circulation is moving just about as close as it's going to get to New Orleans, and then up into Mississippi, where they're going to get clobbered in just about an hour or two. Let me show you where the eye wall is here. Here's downtown New Orleans here, and here's the eye wall of strong winds right there. It's very, very close. You're experiencing wind gusts probably over 100 miles per hour in New Orleans, with significant wind damage associated with it. We're not certain whether or not the surge is high enough to top the levee and come into New Orleans from Lake Pontchartrain, but the winds have been out of the east piling water up, and now they're coming out of the north, and will be very shortly even more so. Now the real threat, though, is past Christian, Mississippi, 1969, Category 5, biggest surge on record, 24 feet. They may get something very similar to that as the eye wall comes just into that area near Biloxi, past Christian, Gulfport area over the next couple of hours, where the winds are going to increase very, very quickly here. Now let's
Are the new coordinates and position 40 miles southeast of New Orleans. Winds now 135 miles an hour. This is still a Category 4 storm, just like Randy said. It is a devastating, very destructive, powerful hurricane. Gusts to 161 miles an hour. Now, pressure is 923 millibar. That's rising. That's a sign that it's slowly starting to weaken as it moves over land. It starts to gain friction. The land, the topography, any buildings, trees, the land itself starts to kind of mess around with the circulation of the storm, and it starts to bring the storm down as far as strength. But this is still an extremely powerful storm. Gust to 161, 923 millibar. The worst case scenario for Biloxi, Mississippi, because it looks like the eye wall, the right front quadrant, is now right on top of Biloxi, or will soon be right on top of Biloxi. This is the area of heaviest rainfall right in here, the strongest winds, and the highest storm surge. And again, we're talking about a storm surge of 20 to 25 feet possible with Katrina. And here's a look at some of the radar bands. This is just a nightmare for New Orleans, Biloxi, all the way over in through Mobile and all along the Gulf Coast here. This area down in
now of heavy rain to go along with that. So some real danger for the people along the coast here of Mississippi. 6 counties have been mandatorily evacuated. We're not seeing anyone out on the streets. No movement at all. There was a curfew in effect last night. and the worst is still to come.
Something burning nearby. Any indication of what that is?
Yeah, John, we can smell it, but we can't see it. You can't really see more than 10 or 20 yards in front of you. As far as the burning goes, it just brings up a larger point of emergency response vehicles when it gets over 60 miles an hour, which certainly this feels like it's well above that now. People can't respond, so you won't see fire engines out, you won't see police cars out, and you won't see ambulances out. Now, Mississippi aggressively was preparing for the worst. They actually brought in a number of ambulances from other states, from Texas and from Georgia, and the Red Cross has set up checkpoints. But you can see in something like this, if you're in trouble, I'm afraid to say you're pretty much...
Of our highest water rises of the entire storm system are occurring right now in the Alabama, Western Florida Panhandle. They should subside fairly quickly as the circulation center moves inland and the wind action starts to slow down a little bit out here. But the waves will be above average for at least another 24 hours in the Gulf of Mexico and on the coast of Florida and Alabama, and also all the way over to Louisiana and Mississippi. Let's look at a couple of other
winds, 75 miles an hour. The center of the storm now lifting up in southern and east central parts of Mississippi. We are still getting very gusty winds. Look at the winds there in Mobile, gusting to 53 miles an hour, 31 in Montgomery, and 29 in Birmingham.
Tornado watch is still posted for much of Alabama over into Atlanta and western Georgia. Numerous reports of tornadoes going on across this area. In fact, we even have a public reporting damage up around Upson and Crawford counties. Those are in Georgia. Public reporting damage from a tornado. So not the time to be out there. Again, it's hard to see these tornadoes with so much rain coming down.
And we've got much more on Katrina coming up in just a few.
December the 1st, that is for sure. Elsewhere in the tropics, this used to be Tropical Depression 13 yesterday. Today it fizzled out, but I'm watching it on satellite. Looks like it's trying to re-energize again.
South of Fort Lauderdale on Thursday evening at around 6:30 Eastern time. We covered that as the first eye wall made its way inland, and then of course the second landfall, which we experienced yesterday morning. It made two other landfalls, the first one being in Burris, Louisiana at around 6:10 a.m. Central Time, and then the third one making landfall on the border of Louisiana, Mississippi at 125-mile-per-hour sustained winds. That's west of where Hurricane Camille made landfall in 1969. So the center of the storm right now of Tropical Depression Katrina is 25 miles south of Clarksville, Tennessee. Still sustained winds of 35 miles per hour, and we could see rainfall totals 2, 4, 6 inches in the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes region, and even into New England. Just want to show you where we're seeing all of that moisture right now. We have inland tropical storm warnings for Tennessee, northern Alabama, and that includes Nashville and Huntsville, and of course those tornado watches extend to the east of this storm. We're going to deal with a lot of heavy rainfall, flood watches and warnings posted for all of those areas. And of course,
one is our tropical depression Lee, which was briefly a tropical storm yesterday. We're also watching a tropical low a little farther southward here. And then at the very bottom of your screen, this is an area we're particularly interested in, this area of disturbed weather that's come off the African coast. This shows some potential for getting better organized and strengthening. So you can see that it is, again, well out in the Atlantic right now, but it is something to keep an eye on for sure, because there is the likelihood that it could become more organized there. Now, we want to head a little farther north, where we are seeing our tropical depression Lee, which is the good news, far away from land and moving out to sea. We see that it is now about 790 miles east of Bermuda, with winds of 35 miles per hour. We think it is going to just head out to the Atlantic and not really be much of a factor in our weather, and that's great news. Now we head farther southward, and it's a tropical low, which is also expected to stay well out into the Atlantic. We'll monitor all these areas for you, but right now, again, things are looking good as far as that's concerned. It's that other system that has moved off the African coast that is of most interest right now. Just to show you what's going on here in the Gulf and
Top wind speeds are at about 35 miles an hour. This is pushing towards the west-northwest at about 16 miles per hour. If you're tracking at home, it's this system right here, and what the National Hurricane Center is saying is that right now it is located just about 1,100 miles east of the Leeward Islands. It's located at 19.0 north and at 46.1 west. Now, being that top wind speeds are at 35 miles an hour, we still have a ways to go to make this a tropical storm and or a hurricane, but if it does so, it will be Maria. Now, I wanted to go ahead and take you out to the eastern view of our satellite of the Atlantic. You can see Lee up in your upper left-hand corner. Then you see TD18, the new storm that has formed, and then you see a wave coming off Africa. At this point, it looks like Lee is losing its tropical characteristics. It looks like TD18 could develop into something more, and that wave scooting off Africa, that also has
5-mile-per-hour winds. It has an intensity.
We've dealt with a huge blow from Katrina across the U.S. Things are really quieting down, but out into the Atlantic, still some activity taking place. Of course, we have what was once Tropical Depression Lee. Here you can see still that counterclockwise flow, but no convection whatsoever. So Tropical Depression Lee out of here. Now, a little bit further south, we do have our other named system, Tropical Storm Maria, and we'll get the very latest on that in just a second. That's our second area of interest, but then as we take a look a little bit further south, there is an area of low pressure that we're going to continue to monitor because we could see it entering into a favorable environment. So there could possibly be a little bit of development. For now, just an area that we are continuing to keep a close eye on. Here's the very latest. Tropical Storm Maria, located about 810 miles east-northeast of the northern Leeward Islands. Winds up to 50 miles per hour, and it's heading off to the northwest at 12 miles per hour. The good news with Tropical Storm Maria is it's not expected to impact land. There is further strengthening that could be possible with it, so we could be talking about a hurricane, say maybe within the next 24 hours or so, but all in all, no impacts to land, so more of a marine interest with Tropical Storm Maria. Here's a closer look off the coast of Africa, and again, we have our area of low pressure here, but take a look at this as we'll continue to monitor this wave as it emerges off the coast of Africa and into the Atlantic. Now, as we head a little bit closer to home, again, things are a little bit quieter, but we still have what was an old front. So we have this trough of low pressure just here stretched out anywhere from the southeastern coast over into the Gulf of Mexico. Along it, well, we could see some possible development. We'll have to continue to watch out. For now, it looks like we could see maybe an increase in our moisture across parts of Florida, so we'll continue to keep an eye out, especially looking at this area just to the north of Bahamas. So we'll continue.
Street, and it was just last year that we were monitoring Hurricane Frances. Well, tomorrow actually marks the anniversary of when Hurricane Frances slammed into South Florida. At that point, it was a Category 2 hurricane. But there was one point, though, when Frances actually was a Category 4, so luckily it did weaken before it actually made landfall into Florida. But at any rate, it still caused a lot of devastation, and there were at least 5 confirmed fatalities in Florida due to Hurricane Frances. Well, as we check on what's happening right now throughout the tropics, we have our 5th named hurricane of the season. This is Hurricane Maria. Right now, a minimal Category 1 hurricane. It's packing winds of 75 miles per hour. Generally lifting off to the north-northwest today, although it will eventually recurve off to the north and east over time. The good news, this poses no direct threat to any land areas. Looking at the latest satellite imagery, we see how Hurricane Maria is still very well organized. It will likely strengthen a little bit more so, we think. And really about the only concern from this hurricane is that it is causing some big seas, some big swells right around the exact center of circulation. And these waves will eventually propagate all the way over towards the east coast. So for the next few days or so, we'll have to watch out for some danger on the eastern seaboard. But aside from that, Maria really poses no direct threat to any land areas, and that's certainly encouraging news. As we look elsewhere, though, we have a low-pressure area right now swirling just south of there. There's a couple more low-pressure systems, too, that have rolled off the African coast. Right now, they're still rather poorly organized. A little closer to home, though, we have this long trough of low pressure stretching from the Bahamas back through the western Caribbean. And sometimes right along that trough axis, we see thunderstorms pulsating and kind of building up. And we haven't seen clusters of disturbed weather right now, but again, nothing is showing any signs of organization.
And this has been just a record-setting year in many ways. We saw the strongest storms in the month of July. with both Dennis and then Emily coming along, and then we get into August, and certainly now we've been dealing with, and will continue to deal with for so long, the effects of Hurricane Katrina. There's also Hurricane Irene that affected pretty much just the Atlantic, but now we have another hurricane, and that is Hurricane Marie, and that is again going to be just affecting maritime interests. It is centered now, as of the 11 p.m. advisory, 475 miles east of Bermuda, top winds 85 miles an hour, moving off to the north-northwest at 13 miles an hour, forecast to curve back off to the northeast with a central pressure estimated at 980 millibars. Now, it looks like a fairly healthy storm on the satellite picture. Notice in the last few frames an eye trying to pop out perhaps here under that central dense overcast, but notice it is to the east of Bermuda, tracking northbound. So the only thing to worry about with this one is going to be likely some heavier surf on the shores of Bermuda and perhaps later on the east coast. And if you're traveling over to Europe, perhaps in, say, 5 days or so, give or take a couple of days, this system will eventually, or some of the moisture from it will eventually make some impact here somewhere in Europe, likely somewhere from the Iberian Peninsula on up toward the coast of Scandinavia. We'll have to see how that plays out down the road as it crosses the Atlantic. We're headed the other direction, though. We're headed to the west. And two things I'd like to point out here. One, south of, between Bermuda and Puerto Rico, notice this cluster of thunderstorms that's just bubbling here. This could develop into a tropical depression over the next couple of days. Likely, if it did, it would likely start off drifting a little bit to the north. But the area we're actually more concerned with is farther west. That's here right off the Bahamas. Look at this area of thunderstorms bubbling up right here, not too far from the Bahamas. Another, what's going on is there's an old cold front that was laying through here. Low pressure along the cold front, when it died out, hung around. And what we're seeing is these thunderstorms bubbling up in that area of low pressure and starting to try and develop a little bit of a spin, to spin up into a low pressure center and perhaps then into a tropical depression. So we'll have to watch this very carefully. Remember, this is where Katrina eventually did make tropical storm status before it started moving westward across Florida. So this is an area we have to watch exceedingly carefully this time of the year because it is so close. You know, you don't have a lot of time to let people know what is coming, if anything is coming.
Miles an hour right now, and this is off to the east of Bermuda. Also want to point out two other areas on this satellite picture while we have it. And you're going to see that to the north of the Bahamas, we've got one area of low pressure. If that develops, it would probably be stationary or meander a little bit. So right now, not too concerned about that. Another area of convection kind of south of Bermuda that if it developed would probably track to the north. The hurricane hunters might investigate that tomorrow. And again, Hurricane Maria, which also looks like it'll take kind of a northerly track. So more of an interest to shipping interests than too much of a human impact in terms of landfall. Quick reference, Hurricane Francis, we talked about that hitting a year ago, but also Hurricane Fran hit.
We're looking at with Hurricane Maria. She's located right about here, and I'm going to talk in detail about that in just one moment. We're also watching a low pressure that's just off our coastline here in South Florida. That has the possible for development here in the next day or two into a tropical depression, as it's pretty stationary right now. It is expected, though, to move on off in a northerly direction. We are also looking at this area of disturbed weather, but that's moving on off in the north-northwesterly direction and doesn't look to be too favorable for development. And there's also a wave just to the east of the Windward and Leeward Islands here, and that one is just moving on off in a westerly direction very slowly. Doesn't look too good for development at this point either. Now, this is Hurricane Maria. It is again to the east of Bermuda, but does not appear to be a threat to land, and that is very, very good news for us. While here in South Florida, though,
a couple minor areas into the Antilles, there's been a little bit of some convection that we'll continue to watch because, you know, it is that time of year where things, even if they don't look impressive now, could eventually spawn up. And then one about halfway across the Atlantic, a tropical wave. But of course, we've got some features closer to home that are even a little bit more impressive. And you can see we've got looks like that graphic did something weird, but Hurricane Maria, and this is well off to the east of the Bermuda area. Winds 105 miles an hour. Did briefly make it to a major hurricane at a Cat 3, but has since diminished. And this really isn't going to be much of a problem, more just a shipping impact. But we also have Tropical Storm Nate, as we mentioned, the newest name to the list. This one does look like it'll intensify and kind of slowly drift to the north. So in Bermuda the next few days, you're going to need to closely monitor this. And then the other area that we've been watching off the coast of Florida. This is the one that we're talking about for the wind and the rain that we're going to continue to see. And then also the aircraft reconnaissance is going to go in there into this afternoon and check out whether you can kind of see a circulation here. So whether that circulation goes all the way down to the surface and whether we have a tropical depression with this system. We'll have that checked out later for you during the day. So other features that we're watching, of course, this is the big one because this is
very heavy rains across the area. Right now we have tropical storm warnings in effect from Jupiter all the way over towards Titusville, Florida, and we have some warnings too for the Grand Bahama area. So again, very squally conditions expected the next from tropical depression. We have tropical storm warnings that have been posted now along the east coast of Florida, running from Jupiter northward over towards Titusville. That does include Merritt Island. There are also tropical storm warnings too that have been issued by the government of the Bahamas from the Grand Bahama area towards Abacos. So this means that tropical storm force winds are expected in these areas in the next 24 to 36 hours. So again, some rough conditions, very squally weather. You can see this large area of disturbed weather just to the east of Miami. That is our newly formed tropical depression, and we'll have more information coming to you as it becomes available. Now, along with this, again, very nasty conditions buffeting the east coast as the winds are picking up today. Winds will likely be gusting between 15 to about 30 miles per hour, and we'll see bands of very heavy rains too coming on shore, perhaps as much as 5 to about 10 inches of rain the next couple of days in association with this tropical depression. Now, just to the east of there, though, we have another system here. This is Tropical Storm Nate, and then, of course, too, we have Maria. As we zoom in closer to Nate, the good news, we don't expect this to be impacting the lower 48. Right now, those packing winds of 45 miles per hour. Further strengthening is likely with this system, as it is in a very favorable environment. We do expect that, though, as it continues to curve off to the north-northeast, it will eventually impact Bermuda, producing very squally conditions there. And lastly, we have Hurricane Maria. The good news with this, it should eventually weaken as it becomes extratropical. It's moving into some cooler waters, and it's just
steadily here, and the circulation center appears to be just north of Grand Bahama Island off the coast of Florida. The next 12 hours, don't look near the circulation center. Look up here because the stronger winds are well to the north of the circulation, pounding northern Florida here with some very high surf and some wind gusts at 30 miles per hour. Even though we have some tropical storm warnings up along the coast down farther to the south, the next 12 that's up here, you're going to get the biggest impacts. Dangerous rip currents as well. We expect this to become a storm and slowly creep toward the Florida coastline over the next 72 hours. Heavy rain, high surf, that's the impact we expect the next 24 to 36 hours over Florida. Which way does it go from there? The official forecast is basically toward the northwest. Some of the models take it into the Gulf of Mexico. Some of them take it off to the north into the Carolinas. Right now, we're expecting just a slow drift toward the northwest, toward the Florida coast. We have a tropical storm out here. This is Nate, and it's heading toward Bermuda, and it's going to become a hurricane before it gets here. Here's our tropical depression 16, by the way, stationary 30 miles per hour. Now, Nate is going to be a threat only to Bermuda, but before we get to Nate, let's look at this circulation here in the Gulf of Mexico. A vigorous upper-level low pressure center. Sometimes we see the pressure fall to the east of those in these areas, particularly when we have thunderstorms, and that's what we see this time of year. A lot of thunderstorms with this, so we're going to be monitoring this carefully. This trough of low pressure could form a low-pressure center. Right now, the whole thing is moving toward northern Mexico, and it'll bring rain to Texas and Mexico. But it's possible we could see something spin up in there over the next 24 to 36 hours. Okay, here's Nate. Right now, stationary, but we expect it to move basically toward the northeast over the next couple of days, become a hurricane as it reaches very close to Bermuda, deteriorating whatever there. Let's get back to Jeff and Dave.
Newest coordinates and numbers on tropical depression number 16. Now the mileage 154 miles northeast of Florida as it begins to move away, South Florida that is. There's the latitude and longitude. The winds have come up a little bit from 30 to 35 miles per hour. It gets to 39 and it gets the name Ophelia, and it is drifting to the northwest. Here's the latest forecast track. This one just in from the Hurricane Center. Moves the system as a tropical storm and then a tropical depression across northern Florida by Sunday. So it moves it up, hangs it to the left, but what a tremendous error cone or possibility circle, if you will, covers literally thousands and thousands of miles when we get out that far. One more graphic I want to show you. That's the radar. Most of the rain now remains offshore, but this has a couple of days rather to go.
Clouds off of the Florida coastline was named as of the 2 a.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. And boy, it is just, it's way too close here to the state of Florida, and a lot of divergence on the forecast paths on this. So we're watching this carefully, and we'll have more information on this coming up in the tropical update at 50 minutes after the hour. Now, far to the north,
A couple of those bands will push through our area, but right now, portions of, say, South Miami-Dade actually getting a break from the cloud cover as well. That is Tropical Storm Ophelia. All right, and let me give you the latest information here on Ophelia, which is situated about 80 miles to the east-southeast of Cape Canaveral. Then you've got Tropical Storm Nate. I want to talk about both of those. There's also Maria, but Maria has now been downgraded to a tropical storm and sort of fizzling out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Tropical Storm Ophelia, though, right there. It's 80 miles east-southeast of Cape Canaveral. If you're a tracker, 28.5 and 79.2. Winds are at 45 miles per hour. But the all-important thing that you're wondering about, where's Ophelia going? Okay, I want you to watch. Here's the forecast, cone of concern, if you will, from the National Hurricane Center. Most likely going to continue on a north-northwest track, maybe even, look, start to take a bit of a northeasterly bank, much like Nate did, much like Nate is planned to do, much like Maria has already done. So let's take a moment. Let's talk about Nate as well, only because Nate is nearing hurricane strength. Right now, maximum winds at 70 miles per hour, about 260 miles to the south-southwest of Bermuda. Once again, trackers, here you go. The numbers, 28.8 north and 66.3 west. Got to spend a moment here and talk about Bermuda, because for a long time we didn't think this was going to really be a cause for concern for Bermuda, but Bermuda is right below the Y in that Friday. So there's the forecasted track. It is making the curve, like we talked about, to the northeast, but watch it one more time. It looks like it could be very close to taking possibly a strike. Okay, we've got all kinds of things that we do want to talk about. Once again, our concern here in South Florida, we watch Ophelia and what Ophelia is doing, but it looks, once again, like she's going to hug the coast.
Tropical storm in the Atlantic Basin. As you can see, it's spinning. That's right, off the east coast of Florida. And the big question is, what will it do over the next 24 hours?
Possibility because the environment is somewhat favorable for further strengthening. Not moving much at all, just northwest at 3 miles per hour. We think that general trend should continue for the next day or so, but there is some uncertainty in its future, and again, it's something we'll have to keep watching because there's not much of a steering current to send it clearly in one direction or the other. So we see that it has 50-mile-per-hour winds, and it is going to be a big rainmaker for areas here in Florida as well as along the southeast coast. And we do have tropical storm watches and warnings in effect here along the Florida coast. Dangerous rip currents, heavy surf. It's going to be a rough time for folks here. As we can see, a lot of the rain right now is off the coast, but some of that beginning to get closer, and we are going to see locally 3 to 5 inches of rain with this very slow-moving system graded to a hurricane. So we will continue to keep an eye on that as we have tropical storm and hurricane watches for Bermuda, as it is expected to affect Bermuda as we go through.
Some showers will try to filter their way on down as well. Center of circulation's just about even with Cape Canaveral here. Most of the shower and thunderstorm activity is on off to the north of that. And you can see the picture here. The center again is right about there. Most of the showers, the thunderstorms are out into the Atlantic, but those that are making their way on shore are doing so near Orlando, up to Jacksonville, even up to portions of the Carolinas and back into Georgia. So we're really seeing a nice dry day here in South Florida for one reason and one reason only. This time we got lucky because here's that line. This is sort of the wet side of the storm, and this is the dry side of the storm. We happen to be in it. So that's one thing that we can be thankful for, at least as of now. But again, as I said, the storm itself is going to be rather temperamental, so this is one that we'll need to watch very carefully. It's already strengthening. Winds are now up to a sustained 50 mile an hour, gusting to 63. The movement is very, very slowly on off to the north and west at 3 miles per hour. The pressure is just at about 1,000 millibars. Now, the forecast track has Ophelia as a tropical storm for about another day, maybe two, then turns it into a Category 1 hurricane. At this point, look at that forecast track. It's sort of all over the place, and the cone of error becomes very, very wide, anywhere from the Carolinas all the way down to that looks like southern Palm Beach County, perhaps northern Broward if we look at that forecast cone of error, but this is really a big cone of error here. So again, this is a storm to keep an eye on. Some of the forecast models have it heading off to the east, some off to the north and east, some call for landfall, Georgia, South Carolina, and another wraps it all the way around, pushes it across central Florida
into the open waters of the Atlantic. We have not one but two hurricanes. The good news is that Hurricane Maria is expected to become extratropical and continue out to sea. We are watching still Hurricane Nate, especially for the Bermuda area, and Tropical Storm Ophelia sitting just off the coast of Florida. The latest on Hurricane Maria, 75-mile-per-hour winds heading off to the northeast at 14 miles per hour. And again, no land impacts with this system, so more of a mariner's interest. Now, a little bit further south, though, here you can see Hurricane Nate. It looks a lot better than Maria, that's for sure. And it's going to be approaching, getting closer to Bermuda as we get through the day on Thursday. Right now, it's about 170 miles south of Bermuda. Winds up to 85 miles per hour, making it a Category 1. It's heading off to the east-northeast at 8 miles per hour with a pressure of 984 millibars. So with the system, we are going to be talking about rain into Bermuda, some dangerous waves, and we do have a hurricane watch in effect for Bermuda, as well as a tropical storm warning. So pretty much the same impacts will be felt here. Again, the winds kicking up, those waves picking up, and the rain. Let's get a little bit closer to home, though, and take a look at Tropical Storm Ophelia. Here it is, not looking all that great, but certainly some convection along with it. The heaviest of the rain still offshore, but it will continue to pick up around Florida's eastern coast, so you will want to, of course, now go ahead and make preparations. Tropical Storm Ophelia, winds around 55 miles per hour. Not expecting very much movement, but further.
Que lo hace en los próximos 5 días, porque no se va a mover mucho de donde está. Este sistema va a estar prácticamente estacionado próximo a las costas floridanas esta noche, temprano mañana, y luego tal vez se separe un poco de la costa, quizás para regresar, ya sea en el fin de semana o tal vez la semana que viene. Esto va a ser largo y tendido. Están viendo la imagen del radar Doppler 51 del huracán Ophelia, huracán de categoría 1, similar a Katrina cuando pasó por aquí, por el área del sur de la Florida. Y actualmente, como ven, se está moviendo poco, está como 80 millas de la costa. La actividad tropical de Ophelia es solamente una de las 3 que están vigentes en estos momentos. O sea, hay 3 huracanes actualmente vivos en el Atlántico. Aquí está Nate al este de las Bermudas. Por acá anda María en el Atlántico Norte, ya perdiendo sus características tropicales. Localmente, sin embargo, nos preocupamos sobre Ophelia y su proximidad a la costa. Los vientos actuales son de 75 millas por hora. Tienen la latitud y longitud en pantalla. La presión ha subido un poco desde las 5 de la tarde. Buena noticia, no queremos que la presión siga bajando. Si sube, el viento disminuye y esperemos que siga subiendo la presión, pero por el momento no es lo que se pronostica. Se proyecta que pueda fortalecerse aún más. Hay avisos de tormenta tropical a lo largo de la costa floridana, desde Flagler Beach hasta Sebastian Inlet. Más al norte es una vigilancia de tormenta tropical. Y ahora la interrogante es cómo se va a comportar esa trayectoria futura del sistema, que pudiera depender grandemente de esto que está aquí, que es una vaguada saliendo de la parte este del Canadá y de los Estados Unidos. Si se conecta la vaguada con la tormenta o el huracán, entonces se aleja.
This can't even hold a candle to that last hurricane. We're on a record pace this year, my friend. There's no doubt about it. The D tropical storm, Dennis, the E, Emily, F, G, all of the rest of them except for Lee, all of these occurred earlier than we've ever seen since we've been keeping track of hurricanes. So Ophelia developed earlier than any other O storm on the
noticed here in the last couple of hours is that the system looks to me to be nearing hurricane strength again. The convection once again bubbling up in the center. The pressure has dropped fairly dramatically here since our last advisory. So I'm estimating that within the next 12 hours or so, Ophelia could become a hurricane once more. The system sort of stalled out a little earlier this morning. Movement has not been very great over the course of the last couple of days, sort of sat stagnant for quite a while. The radar picture showing that most of the rainfall now has moved offshore with this system. You can see some showers and thunderstorms right along the coastline from Jacksonville down to about Orlando, Cape Canaveral area. Most of those staying right near the shoreline. A couple of bands working through well on off to our south, but we've been pretty dry here in South Florida today. A closer look at the imagery shows that there are still some strong showers and thunderstorms embedded within this system. And again, I do think it to be a strengthening system once again, as some of those thunderstorms have been able to make their way onshore from Jacksonville down to Daytona Beach and heading down to Cape Canaveral as we speak. As of the latest advisory, which came in at 11 a.m. this morning, Ophelia was 269 miles to the north-northeast of South Florida. That puts it at 29.5 north, 78.9 west. Winds still sustained at 65, gusting to 75. The pressure is now at 983 millibars, so the pressure has dropped, and this pressure is consistent with a Category 1 hurricane, but the winds are not reflecting that as of yet. The movement is now on off to the north-northeast at 5 miles per hour, and again, I do think in the next 12 hours or so, this could become a Category 1 hurricane again, and the forecast track reflects that as well. Now we think at this point the cone is becoming a bit smaller. You'll remember before it stretched anywhere from the Carolinas down to the Florida Keys, but at this point in time the system will move off to the north and east, is expected to loop back around, and most of the models do that at this point. And it looks as if the most likely place for landfall could be somewhere in the Carolinas to Georgia, but as far southward now as central Florida. So we're still keeping an eye on Ophelia, but down here in South Florida, we still sit on the good side, and it looks like that could be the case for the entire length of the storm.
See this intensify as we go through the day, and it is not really tossing a lot of rainfall into, say, parts of Florida, the coast of Georgia, the Carolinas there, but some rainfall as we take a look around the Daytona Beach area. The heaviest of it, though, appears to be out over the waters, although near Daytona we have seen just a few heavy little downpours sort of cropping up just to the north of that area.
7 millas por hora, alejándose de la costa, no solamente de la Florida, pero de Georgia y las Carolinas también. Una excelente noticia esta tarde. Se mantiene como huracán luego de haber pasado por un mal momento, digamos, anteriormente en el día de hoy, cuando fue degradada a tormenta tropical, pero por el momento tiene vientos de 75 millas por hora nuevamente. La presión central está cayendo, está 983 milibaras, incluso más baja que lo que estaba a esta hora ayer. Pero noten que ya está en 30 grados norte de latitud. Eso definitivamente bastante buena noticia para el área del sur de la Florida, que como ustedes saben estamos más bien cerca del paralelo 25. Comparado con 30, me parece que está bastante distante. Y ven la latitud y longitud entonces ahí en pantalla. Esto es lo que hemos estado observando durante el día de hoy en cuanto a la lluvia asociada con Ophelia. Se ha ido retirando más de la costa. El centro de circulación está a 175 millas de distancia. Ayer estaba solo 70-80 millas de la costa, así que nos parece eso una buena tendencia, pero también hemos estado hablando de la probabilidad de que esto se detenga, o sea, que se aleje de la costa, se detenga en algún lugar aquí y luego dé media vuelta para regresar a la Florida. La buena noticia es que las probabilidades de que cuando regrese a los Estados Unidos ya son mucho más bajas de que venga a Miami, y sí, más altas que vaya a algunos sectores desde el norte de la Florida hasta las Carolinas. Malas para ellos.
Some of the computer guidance does now appear as if it's pointing in a direction that eventually takes a storm toward the United States. Not toward Florida so much, but toward Georgia and the Carolinas. We'll show you in a moment. Visible imagery, it's getting a little dark here, the last picture, but you can see the center right about there, at least temporarily, seems to be moving northeast. In fact, the latest fix has it moving northeast about 7 miles per hour. On the radar scope, again, that kind of verifies that. You can kind of see the center of circulation pulling away. But again, the fear is this is temporary. Most of the time we see these storms take off like that. They don't come back. Once in a while they do when they're blocked. And that looks like that's going to be the case here. As of 5 o'clock, the center of now Hurricane Ophelia again. In case you missed it, went down to tropical storm, back up to Category 1 hurricane status now at 5 o'clock. The winds 75 mile an hour and the gusts to 92, moving, as I said, northeast at 7. Here's the track over the next day. It'll move north, it'll stall, then it is expected to have a westward track back to it. And the reason is strong high is going to move down and push on it and cause it to move that way temporarily. Then another trough picks it up in about, 5 days and moves it up that way, but it looks like it's going to be a problem and an issue.
And the impacts being felt up and down the coast. There's the latest coordinates for you. And again, it's stationary, but those winds are 85 miles an hour.
A satellite picture showing it is kind of asymmetrical in the sense that right semicircle, that has got much more going for it with a lack of dry air and a better environment upstairs. But Kelly, thankfully, the coast in pretty good shape right now.
Yeah, for now, but eventually we do think it'll make its move, and right now we're putting the Outer Banks of North Carolina right down the middle of our projected path, and as you can see, a landfall would not probably occur until maybe the middle of next week, but of course we'll have much more with our hurricane expert coming up shortly.
And again, the hurricane watch is up now from Edisto Beach in South Carolina to Cape Lookout in North Carolina.
Most of the coastline from South Carolina to Florida is beautiful today, just a little bit breezy. The worst weather is in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, where the winds are still fairly strong. You can see the circulation spinning around here. And the eye has gotten a little more rapid.
The latest air reconnaissance flight flew in there and discovered that the winds are down somewhat from what it was earlier. So now it has been downgraded from a hurricane to now a strong tropical storm. It's currently packing winds of 70 miles per hour. It is roughly centered 260 miles south-southwest of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. And again, not moving very much, just slowly kind of erratically moving, kind of drifting in place. Right now, it's slowly moving off to the northwest at about 2 miles per hour. As we check on the latest advisories, Now keep in mind that we still have tropical storm warnings and hurricane watches that remain in effect too at this point, from Cape Lookout all the way down towards Edisto Beach in South Carolina. So what this hurricane watch means, it means that quite possibly in the next 36 hours or so, this area could experience hurricane conditions. So it's something that we really have to watch very, very closely. Right now, as we see this tropical system swirling off the Carolina coast, we can see some of these outer bands kind of brushing the coastline. We've had some occasional rain showers here and there, and certainly the winds too have been picking up, like around Wilmington. We've had some gusts already today in excess of 30 miles per hour. Looking at the latest radar picture here, we do see these outer bands again kind of brushing the coastline. Because it has not been moving very much, right now the heaviest rainfall has continued back over the open waters. But what we think is going to be happening, this will eventually draw closer to the coast. That means the rains will start to pick up, and there is a chance to see again some locally heavy rains over the next couple of days or so, but right now that has not been the case. Something certainly though that we're watching very closely, some very choppy waters, rough conditions, heavy surf. The waves will be increasing. Currently, we're seeing some of the wave action 10 to about 14 feet high just off along the coastline here. So we think the winds and the seas will start to increase, perhaps the seas building as high as 18 feet as the tropical system draws closer. Again, Ophelia, now tropical storm, but it is possible that it will re-strengthen over the next 24 hours. And as it does draw closer, we think it could make its closest approach across North Carolina sometime on Wednesday. Now, there's still a lot of uncertainty about the exact path of Ophelia. It may stay back over the open waters. It could come inland, or it could just barely brush the coastline. So it's something that we really have to watch very, very closely. But certainly all interests across the Carolina coast here really have to watch the situation very closely over the next few days. The good news, though, further upstream, things are staying relatively quiet across the rest of the Atlantic basin. And as we check on some of the weather stateside, though, we've got some storms out there. In fact, we've had some severe...
is still spinning out there and bringing outflow in from the southwest and west, and so that's a moist flow. Luckily, though, look at all the dry air sinking in from central Florida, and so I think we're going to be okay. We'll just see some isolated showers, maybe a storm late in the evening, so don't even worry about it. We're going to have another great day on tap. All right, here's the latest on good old Ophelia. 8 a.m. advisory, 32.2 north, 77.8 west, movement northwest of 4. It's good that the thing started moving. Unfortunately, it is moving toward the Carolinas. It's about 145 miles south of Wilmington at this hour. Here's a track of the system, and you can see...
Tonight, the good news is that the very latest advisory indicates that Ophelia will probably not gain any more intensity. That's the good news. The bad news is that now it's just stationary out here, just hammering parts of North and South Carolina. Those outer bands coming in through Wilmington, Myrtle Beach, and even down as far south as Charleston. The radar showing that the western edge of the eye wall, just offshore of Myrtle Beach, they can expect a 4 to 6 foot storm surge, anywhere between 6 to 10 inches of rainfall when it's all said and done. Here's the 11 p.m. advisory, 75 mile per hour winds, 32.6 north, 78.0 west, now stationary about 150 miles east of Charleston, South Carolina. Here's the forecast cone. High pressure to the east. We have a very weak cool front coming off of the Appalachians. Now, what will happen is that by tomorrow evening, it should be very close to Wilmington, North Carolina, then possibly going right over Cape Hatteras, and then this cool front will just start pushing Ophelia out into the northern Atlantic as a tropical storm. We can probably say goodbye to it during the weekend, and here are the hurricane warning.
Rain's going to be a big player in today's forecast, unless, of course, you're somewhere around, say, the coast of North Carolina. That is Hurricane Ophelia. Right now, centered, well, I'll give you those coordinates in just a moment. I want to talk about the fact that Wilmington, North Carolina, catching the onshore flow. See how it spins like this? So like Charleston, South Carolina caught everything coming off the land. Wilmington, it's the opposite. You are going to see some big-time flooding with this system. When I say big-time flooding, let's keep it in perspective. I mean, nothing like what New Orleans went through, but still, the potential of 15 inches of rain out of the system that's not moving too fast. Now, the reason why we are so dry here in South Florida, we don't have the green, that Kermit the Frog green. The Cookie Monster's here today. Well, we don't have Kermit the Frog either. And if you don't have that green color, you just don't have enough source of moisture in the mid and upper levels that once you heat the air mass up, you can't squeeze, what do they say, you can't squeeze, blood out of a turnip or something like that. You just can't, you can't get it out of it. The atmosphere is not moist enough. So let's go back now and talk about what we see with Hurricane
North Carolina and all the way down to the coastal section.
Get tired soon of mild storms, mild hurricanes, minimal hurricanes, and such talk as that. We certainly learned here in South Florida that there is no such thing. And they're going to learn it there today. Take a look at the satellite picture of Ophelia, and you can see the jog to the right it's made, and it looks like this storm is going to move right near the coast as it slowly edges to the northeast. Now, this purple area down to the south down here, that's where the strongest winds were found by the hurricane hunters, and when they rotate around up in here, that is going to be quite a windstorm, and it's going to cause significant storm surge flooding. Here's the radar now. We can see this eye wall. This was 12 hours ago, so this was this morning, trying to form, but notice there were breaks in it down here, but there's strong parts to it up in there where you see the reds. Now watch it move up to the coast, stall right near Wilmington, and then make the jog over to the northeast. But look now at the eye wall. It's solid all the way around, and it's exceptionally large, near 60 miles across. Reminds us of Francis last year, but they are just about to get pounded there in Atlantic Beach, and there's going to be significant flooding up here in Pimlico Sound. Here are the numbers as of 5 o'clock. Winds at 85. There you see moving northeast now at 7 miles an hour, only 40 miles east of Wilmington. So here slowly it moves on by tomorrow, and then it picks up speed. Looks
a very heavy band of rain showers slowly making its way towards New Bern, North Carolina. The heaviest rainfall rate I saw, 10 inches of rain just over the past 24 hours. It's been incredible. Take a look at the rainfall rates from just the past hour. We've had 0.13 inches in New Bern, North Carolina over the past hour, but I do expect that rate to at least double or triple as we start heading into the next hour or two. That huge band starts making its way in. Now, Ophelia's wind gust, 92 miles per hour. That was the max we've seen at Cape Lookout. Our team of meteorologists in North Carolina tonight with Jeff Morrow, you saw getting pounded in Atlantic Beach. Mike Bettis weathering the storm in Surf City, and storm tracker Jim Cantori staked out in Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. Let's start with Jeff Morrow in Atlantic Beach, where Ophelia has been causing serious destruction.
The eye wall of Hurricane Ophelia continues to pound Atlantic Beach, North Carolina as we head on through the evening hours. Just hour after hour of very strong winds like that, and some very heavy rain blowing sideways, just stinging your face. It's mixed with sand and ocean spray as well. Now the winds have been shifting around here just a little bit, out of the northeast a little bit now, meaning that the eye is starting to pass by just to our south. We're probably going to have a pretty rough night tonight, but hopeful that things get better in the next 12 to 18 hours. Now, a lot of people around here have been preparing, but none more. Starting to howl here, coming around a little bit more offshore, must be coming around a little bit more toward the northeast. What that tells me is that the eye, the center of it, may stay just offshore here in Atlantic Beach if the wind is starting to back around like that. We're hearing about a lot of flooding over on the Intercoastal Waterway. Of course, the end of the pier came off as well about a half an hour ago. So there's a lot of damage starting to show up around this area. But
now until about 11 o'clock, but now we've got a 10 a.m. advisory. It's currently located 35 miles to the southwest now of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, right there on the Outer Banks. 34.8 north, 75.9 west, maximum winds at 85 miles per hour. And here is where it wants to go. What I really want you to notice here for the poor folks that are around the Carolinas, look at how much it moves from now until 2 a.m. Friday. Barely a drop. It's from Friday to Saturday, from Saturday to Sunday. Those are the sort of clips that you hope to see out there. The thing gets on its horse and it's moving, but this is just unbearable. They're probably going to be dealing with winds like around 80 miles per hour that have been sustained for 12 hours. They're going to be sustained for another 12 hours. And, boy, you know, Category 1 or not, we know enough here in South Florida. If they stay on top of you, they can do a lot of harm. Ophelia right there. South Florida looking pretty. This is something I want to talk about. Puerto Rico right there. To the northeast, we see a tropical wave. That's it. It's not getting a name. It's not getting a number, but the National Hurricane Center says it wants to move from the east to the west. So it may track a little more to our north. It may go to our south. But either way, I think Sunday into Monday, it's going to give us a little bit of an increase in a rain chance for that time period. I'm not calling for a washout, but I think that's your best chance for rain. Then as we broaden our scope, this is the one that...
Heavier rainfall, too. So be on the lookout for more isolated showers as we go through the evening.
And today we've been getting a look at what the storm has done. You can see the waves right up next to the houses along the coast there. A lot of damage. Roofs collapsed and walls knocked in. There was flooding in a lot of the inland waterways and roadways. And boy, it's just been really bad in some areas of southern North Carolina. Winds there gusting between 80 and 90 miles an hour. So even though it was a minimal hurricane, a Category 1.
Northeast of Puerto Rico, you can see getting a little better organized. Showers and storms associated with this wave. Friday, Saturday, right around the Español area, and then come Sunday, should be over western Cuba and around the Florida Straits, and this is going to increase our chances for seeing some moisture around here by the beginning of the next work week, as well as breezy conditions along the coastal area. So basically what that means, those of you that are planning on doing some beach going for the upcoming work week, there may be a moderate to high risk of rip currents, so keep that in mind. Meanwhile, out in the tropics, further eastward from that tropical wave is another area of disturbance, possible development within the next day or two to the next tropical depression, which would be number 17 for the Atlantic hurricane season. Of course, we'll keep you posted to that. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the radar across the Carolinas right now. This is Tropical Storm Ophelia, sustained winds at 65 miles per hour, about 40 miles east of Cape Hatteras. By tomorrow afternoon, you can see how close it is across the northeastern seaboard. There is a tropical storm watch here, and with that in mind, those of you that might be traveling to East Rutherford, New Jersey to catch the Finns in action this weekend, look for the chance of some rain showers. Keep that rain poncho handy.
Tropical storm strength again, and that's the 5th time it's been a tropical storm. It was a hurricane for 4 different times. So that's a transformation of about 9, and the only other one that we can remember of nearby proportions was Kyle, that made 11 transformations, and that was in the year 2002. But Ophelia continues to churn along the Carolina coastline, but it has now picked up a little speed. The latest advisory that came out from the National Weather Center indicates that it's about 65 miles now to the east-northeast of Cape Hatteras. Wind still 65 miles per hour, barometric pressure up a tad, showing a little bit of weakening. It's picked up speed too. It's now moving at 8 miles per hour. This again is the latest information. And the forecast path still takes it towards southern New England, at least at the western side of its path, which could affect some of your weekend plans. You want to monitor the situation, especially at Cape Cod and around the Boston area, and then over toward Nova Scotia, where there are still tropical storm watches in effect. The warnings, of course, are still along the Carolina coastline until this moves on out to sea. Now, as we indicated earlier, there's another system that we're watching too. There's Ophelia, but then as you head toward Puerto Rico, we're watching another system here, a tropical low that is sitting over Puerto Rico that'll probably be investigated this weekend by the hurricane hunters for possible development. And we have another system too that could become a tropical depression. That tropical depression down along the intertropical convergence zone here, that will also be monitored for the possibility of development. Here's a little closer picture of it as it heads toward the Antilles and the Windward Islands. Outside of that, over in the eastern Pacific, we have a couple of systems. We have Kenneth, and we also have Hova, and those are not doing anything with land. Heather? One area is over Puerto Rico. You see that here, evidenced by the convection, the orange color that you see on the infrared satellite picture. And that's a disturbance that's interacting with an upper level low. For that to develop, the upper level low has to move westward out of the way, give this full rain, and take away its shear. That could happen. Some computer models indicating that it will indeed happen. So that's an area that's going to be investigated by the reconnaissance aircraft of the hurricane hunters coming up this weekend. And this is the other disturbance. It's a wave or a tropical low that's moving across the tropical Atlantic. It is well to the south. It is moving toward the Lesser Antilles and the Windward Islands. Could mean some squally weather for them, but also could become a tropical depression. There's some indication there could be a surface low associated with that. So those are your two areas.
Puerto Rico is right there. It's a little bit to the north, sort of northeast. It is moving from the east to the west. As of right now, not showing any signs of, any kind of like rotation or cyclone formation, but it clearly
are beginning to get active once again. Here's the big picture this evening, and we have 2 tropical waves we're watching, and this one north of Puerto Rico is actually an upper level low and a tropical wave attached. And then here east of the islands, that's the more significant system right now as far as it becoming a tropical depression sooner. That's the one that's more likely to develop. In fact, the Hurricane Center indicating this afternoon they may fly a plane out here tomorrow afternoon. Notice the concentration of thunderstorms developing east of the Windward Islands this afternoon. Again, that could be our next tropical depression. It would be tropical depression number 17. What about Ophelia? Well, that's finally pulled away from North Carolina. It's moving to the northeast off of the eastern seaboard this afternoon. Latest advisory puts Ophelia 355 miles just generally southwest of Nantucket, Massachusetts. 65-mile-per-hour winds and moving northeast at 13. Again, the future track indicates that it could still come very close to the Cape of Massachusetts later tonight and tomorrow.
Good evening again. TD18 forming earlier today.
7's Jonathan Novak joins us now with more on a very active Atlantic. Jonathan.
Yeah, as it has been, guys, this whole season, and it looks like that's how it's going to be for at least another couple of weeks here as we got a few things to talk about. Here's Tropical Depression 17 right here east of the Lesser Antilles. Remember this area of thunderstorm activity. We're going to talk about that in a second, but the latest on TD17 as of 5 p.m. Winds of 35 miles an hour. Right now, movement northwest around 9, although that's still a little bit up in the air. We're going to get more information as the evening goes on here as the Hurricane Center gets a plane out there and to investigate it. As we see the forecast cone, the initial thinking is this storm could be a tropical storm as early as tonight and potentially a Category 2 hurricane by the middle to end of next week as the storm rides up the southwest area of this high pressure system off in the Atlantic. And again,
this is what it could be, and hence they've kind of held off calling this a tropical storm, but we think it will likely strengthen, and it could very well become Philippe later on this weekend. Right now, there's a system. It's expected to be tracking to the northwest, probably just barely brushing the Lesser Antilles, but it could be impacting Antigua and perhaps Guadeloupe too later on this weekend. So of course we have our tropical depression, which will likely.
Starting off in the tropics, if you joined us today after the UM game, we were talking about tropical depression number 17. This is now tropical storm Philippe. This storm is showing very good signs of organization in the upper levels of the atmosphere, very good outflow. The storm continues to strengthen, and as of 11 o'clock, winds are up to 40 miles per hour, gusting to 52. Movement, though, is good news for us, north-northwest at 5 miles per hour, and that forecast track does forecast it to go to a hurricane, a Category 1 and eventually a 2 by Tuesday, but it gets caught up in a weakness in the high pressure ridge, so it looks like this one will not be of interest of us and maybe not the entire U.S. However, Bermuda may have to watch the storm a little closer. The one we are keeping an eye on that we talked to you off the top of the show is this right here. It was a tropical wave, and the computer models, some of them developed this into a hurricane, and that is now the latest thinking from the National Hurricane Center. This is tropical depression number 18. Center circulation right in through here, most of the convection still back off to the eastern side of this storm. And if you missed it, here is the forecast track. In time, tropical storm Rita by tomorrow, and eventually continuing to move over Andros Island here in the Bahamas, north of Cuba, and somewhere here around South Florida. Now remember, the cone of probability here is rather large, and for a couple of reasons. One, this storm is still forming back here just to the east of the Bahamas, so if the center circulation forms a little bit further to the north, then this entire forecast package has to be shifted to the north. If that center circulation forms a little bit further south, then the entire forecast track has to be pushed to the south. But again, notice the quick timeline here because the storm is just off, again, a few hundred miles. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, the storm is expected to be past Key West. So we're talking in the next couple of days. If need be, we need to make preparations here across South Florida. Here is a little closer view, as I promised you off the top of the show. By Monday, tropical storm over Andros. And then here it is on Tuesday. Again, notice this cone of probability down around the Isle of Youth and as far north as Lake Okeechobee. So that is the latest coming out tonight with the first advisory on.
And past Nova Scotia, no concerns for us at this point.
This is Philippe, and we're going to be watching that very closely as we go through the next few days. It is still several hundred miles here away from the Lesser Antilles, and a little bit closer in proximity to the Bahamas and to the U.S. is our latest tropical depression, number 18, to the north of the Dominican Republic and 95 miles to the east-northeast of Grand Turk Island. Winds with this sustained at 30 miles per hour right now. Movement to the west-northwest at 10 miles per hour. The central pressure estimated at 1,009 millibars. The big question is, okay, what concern do we have? It's only a tropical depression. We do think it has every chance to intensify. We think it will become a tropical storm. Tropical storm warnings have been issued for the Turks and Caicos, as well as the central and southeast Bahamas, which simply means that we could find tropical storm force conditions as we go into the next 24 hours or so. So folks here will really need to monitor this very closely.
Beyond that, it's possible it could become a hurricane. Hurricane watches have been posted across the northwest Bahamas. Now, advice for you here, if you're watching from the southern tip of Florida, from South Florida, including the Keys, monitor this very, very closely, because this may be something that impacts you as we go into this upcoming work week. And again, it's in fairly close proximity here to the U.S. You definitely want to be thinking about getting things prepared just in case. We do think this will become a tropical storm. The name would be Rita. And with that said, it's likely.
Watch has been posted for the Florida Keys. I'll show you those in just a second. Here's the latest advisory, 11 a.m., moving west at 12 miles per hour, still 35 mile per hour tropical depression. That's probably going to change later today. Let's look at the latest visible satellite imagery. Basically, what we have right now is a 12-inch rain event moving to the west at 12 miles per hour, and it's going to go right over the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas and then head towards South Florida. Speaking of South Florida, we have some watches up. Hurricane watches up for the northwest Bahamas and the Florida Keys from Ocean Reef down to the dry Tortugas. The remainder of the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos is a tropical storm warning up. Now let's look at what's going to go on here. This is the upper level water vapor imagery. Here's the circulation over here. Over Florida, we have upper level winds out of the northeast. There's virtually no way that we see this system going north. It's definitely going to go west. And as it gets closer to the South Florida area, it may actually dip to the southwest a little bit with these upper level northeast winds. They're going to turn around a little bit, but this circulation is going to get into the Gulf of Mexico, where we think the environment's going to be more favorable for strengthening. I'm going to continue to monitor that. So basically, expect a west track through the Keys or through the Florida Straits over the next 36 to 48 hours is we're going to see the biggest impacts probably in the Florida Keys with heavy rain and blustery weather. We have another tropical storm out there. This is Philippe. This is out to the east of the Antilles. Right now, winds 50 miles per hour. It's moving north-northwest at 7 miles per hour. It's crawling up a frontal boundary. What looks like a frontal boundary. This is a tropical frontal boundary, sort of an axis of low pressure here. That's where it's going to go.
Jonathan.
Yeah, just down, you guys. Right before we went to the newscast, it was upgraded to Tropical Storm Rita. The outer bands here now reaching the southeast Bahamas. We're concerned with this storm affecting South Florida potentially as a hurricane, but right now it's starting to get together its organization. It most likely will remain a tropical storm here for a little while as it builds up strength. Again, now this is as of 5 p.m., so like literally it was just down right before the newscast. Hadn't had time to change the time on it. So winds of 40 now, which makes it a tropical storm, moving west at 10, pressure around 1,006 millibars, and it's now even closer to Nassau, less than 385 miles east-southeast of that area. Latitude 22.2 north, longitude 72.7 west. The forecast cone, this is the latest down right now as of 5 p.m. Check it out by tomorrow afternoon, heading through the central Bahamas, and then as it passes just south of South Florida by Tuesday afternoon, potentially as a Category 1 hurricane. If things come together in the atmosphere just right, though, worst case scenario, it could be a 2. But right now, the forecast is for it to hang on to that Category 1 status just south of us, just south of the Keys, and then continue on to strengthen as it approaches Texas, as it heads on into the Gulf of Mexico. So right now, what we're concerned with here in South Florida is hurricane-force winds near the Keys and tropical storm-force winds near Miami-Dade and Broward counties. Here's the now. It's already come to tropical storm strength. What can we expect locally?
Well, it's just very slowly come up to tropical storm strength, and we just got that information from the aircraft right before we issued that 5 p.m. advisory to justify upping it to a tropical storm. We think it will continue to strengthen, and there's a good chance that it could be, or the most likely scenario is for it to be a Category 1 hurricane as it passes to the south of us. Of course, how close that core of the system gets to us has some big bearing on how much the winds will be, blowing here.
Yeah, I was going to ask you exactly about that. A small change northward, and we could be looking at a hurricane watch ourselves here in Miami-Dade and Broward counties. That's right. And
even a warning, eventually here, if it shifts southward. Now, there's strong high pressure that's going to be to the north of that, and that's going to keep it on a more westward track. But it sure would not take much of a deviation to the north to
be kind of moving north of Puerto Rico. The computer model said yes, it would likely develop a little bit, and it indeed did. Has developed from depression stage through a tropical storm stage. Behind me are the latest watches and warnings. So let me go through that, because this is the major change, the major update here in South Florida, and this just happened minutes ago. From Ocean Reef down through the dry Tortugas, in other words, all of the Florida Keys in the red, that's now a hurricane hurricane warning. That means hurricane conditions are expected in the Keys in the next 24 hours. Farther north, we've got a yellow and an orange here for Broward and Miami-Dade. That means both a tropical storm warning and a hurricane watch is in effect. So tropical storm conditions are very likely in the next 24 hours in Miami-Dade and Broward counties, and also a hurricane watch, meaning hurricane conditions are possible in the next 24 to 36 hours in Broward, Miami-Dade counties. The green has been extended up the west coast, Cape Sable to Chokoloskee. That's where a tropical storm watch is in effect for the west coast. Tropical storm conditions possible there. So hurricane conditions are expected in at least part of the Florida Keys. Tropical storm conditions are expected in Dade County and Broward County, and a possibility of stronger conditions than that. A hurricane watch is in effect as well. Why has this happened? Why has it changed? Well, it's because the storm looks like it's growing a little bit, and its movement, perhaps the repositioning, has been a little bit north. We're still waiting on some of the latest numbers and figures and statements from the National Hurricane Center on the 11 o'clock advisory, but we certainly have enough to know that this system is continuing to grow. As it looks like on the satellite imagery, we've got all of these red pods here that seem to be increasing both in scope here and in size, and now lately it's kind of arcing back to the south here, so still not a really well-defined storm. The winds are remaining at 50 miles per hour. They went up to 50 at 8 p.m., remained at 50 miles per hour. The center of circulation appears to be somewhere near Great Inagua Island, or perhaps Little Inagua, right in through there, not directly underneath the circulation center. On the radar, we're seeing some showers that are moving from the northeast to the southwest. This is with the outer flow around the storm as of this time. Looking at the radar from a farther view, we can see the same showers moving through. The radar doesn't reach all the way over to here to where the center of the circulation is, but if it did, I'm sure it would see all kinds of rain there near the southeast Bahamas, Long Island, Crooked Island, all down there. All right, as of 11 o'clock, this just came in here, so we're looking at, for the first time, 483 miles east-southeast of Miami. That's the position of Tropical Storm Rita. You can see the green here indicating that it has turned from depression to tropical storm. The winds are 50 miles per hour, gusting a little bit higher and moving west-northwest at 10 miles per hour. This is going to be the newest forecast track, and I'm going to be seeing this for the first time along with you. This is the position, and obviously this is a shift to the north, a significant shift to the north of the track. The last time we saw the track, it was down closer to Cuba. This has now moved north by, it looks like, about 50 miles, and it looks as if it is increasing in strength from a Category 1 hurricane to a Category 2 hurricane as it moves through. The timing on this, 8 p.m. Monday there, 8 p.m. Tuesday underneath my hand, and 8 a.m. Tuesday and 8 p.m. Tuesday moving away. Now, we have a closer view of this. We'll stop it at several locations. There's tomorrow night at 8 o'clock as a tropical storm close to Andros Island as a Category 1 hurricane by 8 o'clock Tuesday morning, very close to the Keys by 2 o'clock. By 8 o'clock on Tuesday, 8 o'clock Tuesday morning. Then the storm grows into a Category 2 hurricane as it passes very close to Key West. But you can tell what has happened with the track has not only moved to the north, but the error possibility has moved to the north as well. So it looks like all of Miami-Dade and Broward County as well, also under this cone of possibility. So it is possible that the storm could be north, it could be south. The farther out you go, the lesser the possibility, but still the track here has been adjusted significantly north from what it was before. So this is a major change here, and it looks like the Keys are really going to be
O'clock on Monday, tropical storm force winds in the yellow, stronger in the orange. That is 58 to 73 miles per hour over the top of Andros Island in the Bahamas. And again, a significant change to the north. Earlier today with the 5 o'clock advisory, we saw tropical storm force winds approaching the mid-Keys, say Marathon, Isla Mirada. With this latest advisory, we're now seeing weak tropical storm force winds all the way through the northern parts of Dade County, possibly even the southern parts of Broward. This line goes, again, right north of downtown Miami.
Under shape to it, but still not a well-developed system, and there's where the center is. And notice down to the south of the center, there isn't much. But hurricane hunters up here to the north found an eye wall trying to develop in there, and that's always a sign of intensifying system, and also they found the pressure dropping some, although not dramatically. This big glob out here of thunderstorms is sort of part of a big feeder band that's trying to form, but it's still a fairly disorganized system, and that's why, of course, still a tropical storm. Here are the numbers as of the 11 o'clock advisory: 22.9, 73.3. Winds still held at 50 miles an hour, moving west-northwest at 10, and you can see if it were to continue west.
500 miles east, less than 500 miles east of the Keys, and keep an eye on all those dark colors, because once they band completely around the center of circulation, it
has gotten a lot better organized. You can see a small area of thunderstorms has pretty much exploded into a large area of thunderstorms that is tending to wrap around a center now, the center located right in this general area. So as you look, you can see the thunderstorms have now almost encircled the center, so that's an indication that we're into a strengthening phase, or getting ready to go into a strengthening phase as it continues to move to the west there. You also note that even though the center is located down in this area, there is a lot of weather in terms of heavy rain and gusty winds to the north of the center. So as the center continues to move to the west, all of that weather is going to be headed towards South Florida, and the weather should go downhill rather quickly tonight and then continue quite nasty during the day tomorrow, with only slow improvement tomorrow night and Wednesday. So we need to be ready to
Louisiana and eastern Texas, and that will eventually turn it due westward, or maybe even a tad south of due west. But in the meantime, it could creep up a little bit more towards the north.
Now at this point, and I know this may be splitting hairs, but what are you watching more? The high, the shape of the high, how the high is moving, or the storm itself?
Well, both, and you can still have a little reorganization within the storm structure itself here, and we'll watch here on the 11 o'clock advisory if there's a significant shift in some of the models here to the north. We may very well have to extend the hurricane warning up into at least Miami-Dade County, where we have the hurricane watch up. That means that conditions are possible. And the main concern is still the Florida Keys right now, but we're cutting it very, very close here in Miami-Dade County.
Max, some of the things we've talked about, we probably haven't talked about enough, is that we're running astronomically high tides now. So the threat for storm surge a little more significant?
Well, the tidal variation is not all that great here or in the Keys, but even with the 6 to 8 feet that we're currently forecasting in the Keys, and probably 3 to 5 feet here in, on the southeast portion of the peninsula, that's still a significant storm surge. And the folks in the Florida Keys, I know you're broadcasting down there. This is all they get are the Miami stations there in the Keys. They need to be aware that they can have both storm surge flooding from the the Florida Strait side and from the Florida Bay side. If the center moves over the Keys, the return flow of the backside of the hurricane will give them some of the highest storm surge values. In fact, this is what it would look like here. Some of the highest values could be there in the lower Keys from the Florida Bay itself.
So that would be a north wind pushing the bay onto the Keys. And they don't typically, the last two storms, they haven't seen storm surge flooding from that side.
Right, well, if it passes south of Key West, well then, they're not going to have that. But if the track shifts, it's a little bit more to the north, which is certainly possible. We're very concerned about the Keys, and that's why they have the mandatory evacuation down there.
All right. Now, here in Dade, we kind of use Katrina now as our benchmark. What is the thinking in terms of if it takes a little more of a north track, how it compares to Katrina?
Well, in Katrina, that donut around the eye there, the eye wall, that's where the really strong winds were, and that came right across Broward and Miami-Dade County. Right now, the most likely scenario is for that eye wall to stay down.
Hurricane conditions. Hurricane watch, they tell you, hey, keep your eyes out and watch. It's possible in 36 hours you may also be experiencing hurricane conditions in Broward. Broward under a watch, Miami-Dade, all the way down through the Keys, hurricane warning. That's the more important of the two. Here's what Rita is looking like right now. She's just starting to get more and more organized as the morning goes on. I just keep reiterating this point. I'm sure so many of you are right now, just your heads are spinning because you got up for work, you went into work, you're going, hurricane watches, what is going on? Sure enough, this has really intensified quickly between the central Bahamas as it moves east, and a lot of times we watch these things intensify from way over in Africa, but no, this year has been the year of the warm waters, east of, say, the Bahamas, really churning these things into pretty potent systems, as we all know from our past experience. The 11 a.m. has it 430 miles to the east, southeast of Key West. Now, it's moving at well, to the north, to the west, northwest, around 12 miles per hour. Now, if just for easy math, if that was say 10, yeah, you're looking about 43, 42 hours from now is when the center of circulation would be closest to us, all right? However, the outer bands will be here before that. We are talking about a time frame here. Check this out. This is the forecast track for Rita, and as we put it into motion, here we go. From right there as a Category 1 to right there as a Category 2. It's a 24-hour table given to us from the National Hurricane Center in which Rita is going to strengthen from a Cat 1 to a Cat 2. Now, is it out of the question that this Cat 2 strengthening might not be taking place just south of the Keys or within our vicinity? This is a system
popping up right in the vicinity of Great Exuma. That is likely part of the eye wall trying to form with the center of the tropical storm. Now, you can see that that center part is not especially big, and it's moving to the west-northwest in the direction of the Keys. The question is it going to keep moving that way? Is it going to bend back to the left, or might it come up closer to Miami-Dade County and Broward County? And that's why the hurricane warnings have been extended further to the north, because there is not certainty about that. Now, Max Mayfield is standing by at the National Hurricane Center. Max, the storm is clearly getting better organized on the satellite picture. What's your thinking on how close a call this is going to be for, first of all, the Keys, and then here on the southeast coast?
Well, as you said there, it definitely looks like it's getting stronger. The next airplane will be in there in a couple of hours now, and it certainly should be getting near hurricane strength, if not at hurricane strength. And we're very confident it will continue to strengthen. In fact, we're really getting worried about that here. Is that you know, it's got a day and a half really to get to clear the Keys, so it's got plenty of time to strengthen some more. The biggest impact will be, you know, in Monroe County in the Florida Keys there, but we've got limited skill, not just in the track intensity forecasting, but in forecasting the radius of those hurricane and tropical storm force winds. So, you know, all those factors play into the reason why we extended that hurricane warning up into Miami-Dade County.
Max, you just got notification that all residents of the Keys are now ordered evacuated, all of the Keys.
That's a good call, Brian. This, especially as it looks like it's strengthening here, and I just fully support that decision.
Now, just to reemphasize what you said, because I know we've been through this before. Here's a tropical storm offshore, and now we're talking about a full evacuation. Folks in the Keys think of themselves as hardy folks. But they have not seen, if this does continue to intensify and ends up being a Category 2, or heaven forbid a Category 3 hurricane near the lower Keys, we haven't had such a storm in many, many, many years.
That's right, and well, George, some people remember there in the lower Keys, a Category 2 hurricane that passed south and west of Key West here. This is too close to call here. We're forecasting to be a Category 2 before it clears the lower Keys. Could it be a Category 3? Sure.
Yeah, and George, as we know, in Key West was marginal, or up the Keys a little further. In Big Pine, for instance, it was a pretty bad storm.
Yeah, this is going to have a real impact on the Keys. There's no way around that. People down there really need to listen to the advice of their local officials.
Well, we have another issue going. We have this astronomical high tide going here. In fact, there is already some flooding in Miami Beach and in Miami from the bay being so high. But combine that with the storm surge here, this could be a significant flooding event in the Keys as well, could it not?
It certainly could be, and you know, the high tide did get people this morning. It'll be another high tide tonight, and you know, every 12 hours or so.
Circulation is probably right here. These are the Exumas, and right about there is probably the center. So it's underneath the ball of convection, which is conducive to a strengthening tropical storm. And if we look at what the radar is showing us, there's the center right about there. There's Long Island just to the right in the Bahamas. You can see the moisture wrapping around the center and increasing now as the system comes close to us. These are little bands of rain that will be going through this afternoon. Some moderate to heavy showers. They're moving very rapidly, so it's the kind of
dark red. They are a little bit southwest of Andros Island. It does appear that this tropical storm is strengthening to a hurricane possibly later today or sometime this evening.
Indeed. Coming up next, we're still going to have more on Rita at the bottom of the hour.
this is where I want to leave you, talking about what's driving Rita as it continues to move. Right now, it looks like west-northwesterly fashion, eventually possibly a little more off to the west. It gets center circulation right in through there, that around the Exumas and Long Isle and the Bahamas. And what we're seeing is high pressure ridge off to the north, and that's pushing down on Rita. Don showed you the flattening of the clouds on the north side of the storm. And what that's allowing here over time is for the storm to keep moving through the Florida Straits. But again, the little northerly jaunt here, the center circulation, has brought the forecast track for now a little closer to the Keys and us here across Dade and Broward. And with time, we expect the storm to continue to move in this general direction. The high pressure ridge is forecast to hold on and stay where it's at, taking the storm in a more westerly track here. So right now, high pressure, the stronger it is here over the next few hours, may keep the storm a little more westerly, may even bump it a little further to the south. We'll keep an eye on not only the high pressure ridge, but also all the information coming in with Tropical Storm Rita.
Up to 110 miles per hour. So could we see mandatory evacuations for the rest of the Keys and for residents here?
Very concentrated over the center of the tropical storm. The banding features have definitely improved here. You can see on the visible imagery here. So there's just no doubt that it's going to continue to strengthen. And I'm very glad that the local and state emergency managers have recommended this or ordered the mandatory evacuation down there in the Keys.
So at this point, with the hurricane warning already been extended, the warning, of course, from, I believe, Golden Beach southward, what should residents now in Miami-Dade be focused on before the sun sets?
Well, they have this afternoon, this evening to make their preparations. I would not say wait till tomorrow to do that. You know, the greatest concern is obviously going to be down in the Florida Keys, but given the uncertainty that we have in the track and intensity and in the size, remember when we did that, we didn't even have any hurricane force winds, so we're just making our best forecast we can on the radius of those hurricane force winds, and it's just, it was too close to call there to not put Miami-Dade in the hurricane warning. And the truth is, it's a little bit academic here, whether the winds are 60 miles per hour, 65 or 75 miles per hour. We're going to know that there's a hurricane passing down. The core of the hurricane hopefully will stay down to the south, but we'll obviously have some impacts there.
Again, Max, something that needs to be, I think, reiterated in this case. We're talking about a hurricane, although you're hearing this from reporters on the field and being asked the same question. You know, some of these residents are saying, oh, it's just a Category 1, it's just a Category 2 hurricane, and all storms are different. What can you tell residents who kind of have this mentality or this view of this storm?
Well, we could remind them that Katrina was only a Category 1. This is likely going to become a Category 1 hurricane this afternoon, but again, it's going to continue strengthening. If it helps any, I'm going to put my shutters up tonight.
Great. One last question, Max. I know you mentioned that you are putting up shutters. When is the last kind of go around at preparations? When is it too late? When should the preparations be intact for those residents that are planning to put their shutters up?
I think we need to go ahead and take advantage of this afternoon and this evening and not wait till tomorrow to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Max Mayfield, for talking with us. Again, the director for the National Hurricane Center, and as he'd mentioned, you want to make sure you get those preparations in completion. Again, what we can expect for today, you're already seeing plenty of moisture out there ahead of the storm. And in case you want to get the latest coordinates, again, on Rita sent directly to your cell phone, all you have to do is simply sign up by logging on to WSVN.com. We'll be back in 2 minutes with more.
When I was growing up, it seemed Mom had all the answers. That's what moms are for. But since she's been on Medicare, finding affordable health coverage hasn't been easy. And health care costs keep rising. That's why you should call now and learn about Medicare Complete, the health plan that gives you more benefits than original Medicare alone, including prescription drug coverage. For no extra plan premium. That may sound too good to be true. But it is true. A contract with the federal government.
At the big Kmart here off US 1, what we've seen around here is a lot of boarding up, a lot of up going on. Even talked to the city manager earlier. We're going to get to an interview with him in a little bit.
We will be on the backside of Rita, we hope, at this point. The moisture tail is still going to be out there, and we'll have some showers swinging on through. So storms still in the offing, but things should be improving, especially as we head through the latter part of Wednesday. Okay, boating, if you have anything left to do, you need to get it done right now. I know this is a huge concern. A lot of people have tons of money invested in their boat. You really need to get it done immediately and then stay out of the water. The winds gusting to about 30 knots through the afternoon. The seas are going to be building up to about 9 feet, and rough is probably a gross understatement on the bays as we head into the overnight. Increasing wind and rain through the evening. Temperatures will hold into the lower 80s, and then Tuesday is going to be the worst day out of the bunch as we are enduring Rita. And
I saw the family friend hotel we had.
Cancel NASA. Griffin points out that the current NASA budget is about $16.5 billion, and to put that into perspective, that's about 0.7%, a fraction of 1% of the total federal budget. And he says we've already budgeted for NASA, and it is not going to expand. At least the plan is not.
Little polka dots of rain cells going over the Broward County and South Florida area, and we just had one go through and come and go. We had a little bit of rainfall. If you look on the ground, we had just a little bit of rain, and we have a very steady onshore breeze here, but what was an otherwise very sunny and nice afternoon here on Fort Lauderdale Beach has probably ended for the last time as Rita just picks up and closes in on the area here. The flag here at the lifeguard stand is just at yellow as for a caution, and the lifeguard stands are still open. So are the businesses along A1A. People are trying to get in one last sunny afternoon before the conditions worsen as the day goes on, and of course, the concern along here always in South Florida is the beach erosion. Now, Hollywood Beach got it the worst when Hurricane Katrina went on shore 3.5 weeks ago. They lost tons of sand, and they had already been undergoing millions and millions of dollars of a reclamation project there along the beach erosion. So you have to keep an eye on that, especially for the southern portions of Miami-Dade as the storm surge picks up. Of course, the difference here in Broward County is that we are only under a hurricane watch at this point, so there remain a few last holdouts here on Fort Lauderdale Beach. There is someone kite surfing out there on the water, and if we pan back to the left, Kevin, you can see some of these barges leaving from Port Everglades. They, of course, are heading north, perhaps as a precaution, because they know what lies to the south and east of here. So we will continue to monitor the situation here in Broward County as the onshore breeze continues to stay steady and picks up, and the rain cells come through again. We're just going to dry off and wait for the next one. For now, we're live in Fort Lauderdale. Dave Cartoonin, 7 News.
All right, Dave. Well, Rita could really rock the boat for some in South Florida.
And that's why the time to prepare is now. You had heard the head of the National Hurricane Center saying he's putting his shutters up tonight. 7's Tom Haynes with some advice from other experts.
When it comes to protecting a boat, the last thing you want is some watered-down plan. Instead, your best bet is to get the vessel out of the water and out of the storm's path. And if that's impossible, try to secure the boat by using a lot of rope.
You're going to need extra lines, some other hardware, maybe shackles, some chain. And if you wait till the last minute, chances are it'll be difficult acquiring the gear that you need.
The gear you need is enough rope to secure the boat from all 4 sides.
You're going to want it secured side to side and backwards and forward as well.
Good, sturdy nylon rope with some give or stretch is the best bet. But if your boat's over 25 feet long, use 3/4 inch rope or bigger. A good rule of thumb, make your lines about as long as your boat. That way it has plenty of room to move up and down with the tidal surge.
What you want to envision when you're tying your boat up is your boat rising 10 feet above, and if your lines are too short, they won't be long enough for the stretch and for your boat to move freely in the slip.
But don't just tie the rope to the deck cleats. That may not be the sturdiest spot. Instead, try to secure your boat to the strongest points possible. Then make sure the lines are free from any unnecessary rubbing.
The chafe on the wood would definitely go, but if you put this all the way around the whole thing and secured it with tie wraps, your line's going to last a lot longer.
Your lines have also got to last if you're going to store your boat at home.
You can use trees, augers, things that go into the ground that will provide a stable anchor point.
You can even tie your boat to the house if you have a sturdy pole or post. But don't forget to also secure the trailer by tying it up and blocking the wheels so